Hello, my dear friend of sleepy history. Welcome back to this quiet place, where time flows like a lullaby, and the earth tells her stories in whispers. Tonight, we open the gates to episode 10, the Triassic period, a chapter of rebirth and reinvention. The oceans have wept, the forests have fallen silent, an entire world has been lost. But from the stillness, life rises again. Stranger, bolder, more mysterious than before. Tiny creatures scurry under red skies. The first dinosaurs take cautious steps. Continents drift like dream maps, and evolution begins to paint a new canvas. This is not the world we knew. It is a world daring to hope again. And before we begin, what time is it where you are? Is the moon watching you? Or is the sun just beginning to yawn? Because even across 250 million years, your presence here is felt. Now close your eyes and step gently into the dreamscape of the Triassic. A dreamlike journey through the ashes towards the early dinosaur dynasty. Part 1. After the Earth's long sigh, the great extinction, the last whisper of the Permian. Welcome back, dear dreamer. Tonight we begin again, not with a bang but with a hush, with a long, deep breath from Earth herself, a breath so slow, so heavy, that it nearly ended everything. We're standing at the edge of time, the moment when one world ends, and another, trembling and unsure, begins. The great Permian period has reached its final page. Its forests have sung their last lullaby. Its ancient giants, the sail-backed reptiles, the lumbering herbivores, the armored beasts of deep time, have walked their last trails under the old sun. But the story isn't over, because even in endings, life finds a way to whisper, "I'm still here." It began beneath our feet, far beneath where fire sleeps. A ripple, a crack, a pressure too long held, and then a roar without a voice. The land split open in the place we now call Siberia. Volcanoes, not one, not 10, but thousands, rose like red blisters across the Earth's skin. They didn't erupt for days. They erupted for hundreds of thousands of years. Imagine that. Endless rivers of lava painting the sky orange, darkening the air with ash thick as sorrow. And with each breath, Earth changed. Carbon and methane surged into the skies, wrapping the planet in a blanket far too warm. The oceans lost their oxygen. Yes, even the seas began to drown in silence. Fish floated belly up. Corals curled into ghosts. Reefs that had once glittered like underwater cities faded into tombstones of salt and stillness. Rain fell as acid. Forests withered like crumpled paper. And the air began to bite instead of soothe. It wasn't a single day. It was a long goodbye, slow, aching, and irreversible. And yet, in the quiet aftermath, in the trembling hush that followed the firestorm, something astonishing happened. Some things survived. Not the grand, not the fierce, not the brilliant, but the small, the strange, the stubborn. There was one, a little creature with stumpy legs and a squat face. Not beautiful, not fast, but oh so resilient. Its name was Lystrosaurus. Yes, it sounds like something you might name your dog. It lived in the mud. It dug into the earth when the sun was too hot. It ate roots and leaves and didn't ask for much. While others perished in elegance, Lystrosaurus, awkward, sleepy-eyed Lystrosaurus, just kept going. And for a time after the extinction, it made up nearly 90% of all life on land. Isn't that wild? It wasn't the most clever. It wasn't the strongest, but it was adaptable. And sometimes the secret to survival isn't having sharp teeth or strong legs. It's knowing when to hide, when to rest, when to stay quiet, and wait. And Lystrosaurus wasn't alone. Some tiny ancestors of mammals, the therapsids, also crept into the shadows, curled into burrows, and whispered to the dark. We're not done yet. A few fish lingered in oxygen-poor waters, slowing their heartbeats like monks in meditation. Some insects changed shape. Some seeds remained dormant for centuries. Some fungi rose to eat the dead and turned decay into life again. Earth, though scarred, had not stopped breathing. This was the Great Dying, the largest extinction in the planet's long, winding history. 96% of marine species, 70% of land species, gone. But let that number remind you of something deeper. 4% survived. And from that 4%, from that tiny sliver of stubbornness, patience, and silent courage, a new world was born. Perhaps you've had seasons like this, moments when it felt like everything around you was vanishing, people leaving, dreams crumbling, even your own strength drifting like ash in the wind. Maybe you've known what it's like to hide in a dark place and wait for the fire to pass. Maybe right now you're still there, and if you are, let me tell you this gently, you are not failing. You are Lystrosaurus. You are the root digger, the burrow maker, the quiet heartbeat that endures. When louder things fall away, recovery takes time. For Earth, it took millions of years. The skies had to clear. The seas had to relearn how to carry oxygen. The forests had to begin again. One seed, one sprout, one leaf at a time. But they did, and so will you. Even now, beneath all that loss, new life is dreaming of the light. And isn't it funny, in the most tender way, that some of the survivors were odd little creatures who never meant to be heroes? They just held on, not to ambition, not to glory, but to the simple will to stay. They remind us, healing isn't always grand. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sleeps in the mud and breathes in silence. So let yourself rest. If you've crawled through ash and sorrow, if your sky has felt too heavy to bear, remember, even Earth had her season of collapse, and she made it through. So will you? You are not broken. You are between chapters, and the next one begins with breath. Sleep now, dear traveler. In the next chapter, you'll feel the earth stir. The first ferns will uncurl their fingers. A breeze will return to the valleys. The oceans will shimmer again, not as they once were, but in a new rhythm. In the quiet, the world is rebuilding, and so are you. Good night, from the last breath of the Permian to the first heartbeat of the Triassic. To the first breath of the Triassic. The storm has passed. The skies have wept and gone still. The fire has calmed, and the earth, though wounded, begins to breathe again. It is the dawn of the Triassic, a time with no name yet, no certainty, no grand anthem, only a whisper, a hush, a flicker of warmth returning to a frozen world. And in that silence, something stirs. The soil, once scorched and sour, begins to soften. Ash gives way to seeds that were waiting, patient, hidden, stubborn. A single shoot of green breaks through the gray, and then another, and another. Soon, here and there, across the broken continents of Pangaea, patches of life begin to quilt the land. The ferns are back. So are horsetails and seed ferns, ancient plant lineages weathered but not gone. They stretch skyward once more, like the earth lifting her arms towards sunlight, for the first time in a very long while. And where plants go, life follows. The survivors, the unsung heroes from Permian's ashes, begin to wander this new world. They are not many, but they are enough. You'd recognize some of them, or at least their great-grandchildren. There are distant ancestors of mammals called cynodonts, small, warm-blooded, and shaggy in strange ways. There are odd, long-snout reptiles stalking the edges of streams. And in the trees, insects have returned with their delicate wings, painting the air with the sound of life once more. It's not a jungle yet, not even a proper forest, but it's a beginning. The world is still hot, too hot really. Pangaea, the great single supercontinent, stretches from pole to pole, a vast and arid landmass with deserts larger than countries. Rain falls unevenly, and much of the land remains dry and cracked. But in the places where water pools, in the valleys where the air softens, ecosystems begin to bud. Tiny freshwater lakes, newly formed floodplains, soggy corners of earth where creation tries again. Now listen closely. Can you hear the breath? It's faint, but it's real. The oceans, once suffocating and still, are beginning to move again. Winds sweep across the waves, stirring oxygen back into the shallows. Takes time, millions of years, in fact, but coral reefs begin to form once more. Not the same corals as before, but bold new architects, early ancestors of modern stony corals, building strange cities of limestone in emerald waters. Fish return to these reefs, crustaceans, ammonites. The slow revival of marine ecosystems begins beneath the tide. The ocean, though wounded, is singing again. On land, a quiet revolution is happening. The creatures that survived the Permian extinction are not just holding on, they're changing. Some of the small, scurrying cynodonts begin to grow furrier. Their teeth shift shape. Their bodies get warmer, faster, more efficient. They're becoming something new. Not quite mammal, not quite reptile, but the blueprint is unfolding cell by cell. One day, millions of years from now, they will become wolves, cats, humans. But for now, they are shadows, fragile, hopeful, hungry. And elsewhere, something else is rising. Among the reptiles, a certain group begins to stretch its limbs. They stand a little taller, move a little faster, breathe a little deeper. These are the archosaurs, a diverse family tree that includes crocodiles, pterosaurs, and something else entirely, a quiet contender, light-boned, two-legged, curious. You wouldn't think much of them at first glance. They look like awkward teenagers at a school dance, not quite coordinated, all limbs and nerves. But give them time. These strange newcomers will become dinosaurs. Yes, dinosaurs. But for now, they're just trying not to fall over their own feet. We all start somewhere, don't we? And while evolution is busy experimenting, the Earth continues to shift and breathe. Pangaea begins to tremble, not with volcanic rage this time, but with a gentler stirring beneath. The great supercontinent is starting to crack. Not explode, not collapse, just drift. Very slowly, the pieces that will become Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Americas are pulling apart like puzzle pieces easing from one another. It will take tens of millions of years, but already rivers are changing course, winds are shifting, and animals are learning to adapt, to walk farther, swim deeper, sleep longer. And isn't that just like healing? Not an instant transformation, not a triumphant song, but a slow, stumbling dance toward stability. Every blade of grass that returns, every creature that braves a new form, every continent drifting gently, giving room for new oceans to whisper between them. This is resilience. And still, even in this healing, there is loneliness. Much has been lost. The earth remembers. Entire families of creatures will never return. Whole forests have turned to coal. Fossils lie in silence, never to rise again. But the earth does not dwell in grief. She remembers, yes, but she moves forward. With each breath, she whispers to her surviving children, "You are enough. Keep going." So maybe tonight, if you're in a place of beginning again, if your own world has cracked open, and you're not quite sure what's growing yet, let this be your lullaby. You don't have to be who you were. You only have to breathe. You only have to take root where you can. You only have to try, even if all you're growing is one quiet leaf in a scorched garden, because Earth did the same, and look how far she came. So sleep now, with the breath of Triassic wind over you. Imagine the ferns stretching toward the new sun, the small creature curling in its nest, the oceans singing their slow return. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are in the season of returning. Let it come. And when we return in the next chapter, we'll meet the pioneers of a new empire, the early dinosaurs, the unlikely rulers of a healing world. But for now, let your bones rest. Let your breath match the planets, and drift gently into sleep. Good night, dear traveler. The first breath has been taken, and there's more life to come. 3. The Oddballs Who Survived, a comedy of evolution. Now that Earth has taken her first breath again, you might expect her to rebuild herself with grace, to repopulate her lands with balanced, majestic forms, sleek predators, wise grazers, perfect trees standing in polite rows. But no, evolution doesn't work like a curated garden. It's more like a messy kitchen after midnight, experimenting, improvising, sometimes hilarious, sometimes horrifying. And the Triassic? Oh dear one, it is where the oddballs shine. Let's start with Placerias. Imagine a hippo wearing armor made of pudding. Now give it a pig's face and the patience of a grandpa napping in the sun. That's Placerias, a herbivore about the size of a cow, but with a stocky barrel body, short legs, and a permanent, "I just woke up" expression. It wasn't fast. It wasn't clever. It didn't have cool claws. But it had one thing going for it. It was unbothered. It grazed. It waddled. It minded its own business. And in a chaotic world, sometimes that's exactly the strategy that works. Then we have Eoraptor, one of the earliest known dinosaurs. You might expect this little legend to roar like a lion or stomp like a tank. But no, Eoraptor was the size of a dog. It had long legs, a delicate frame, and giant eyes that said, "I'm trying really hard to stay alive, okay?" It darted between ferns, chased bugs, and avoided everything larger than itself, which was almost everything. But its nervous energy paid off. It represents the humble beginning of the dinosaur dynasty, proof that even the great rulers of prehistory started out twitchy and underwhelming. And then, then there's Coelophysis, lean, long-necked, big-eyed, like a spaghetti noodle possessed by caffeine. Coelophysis was quick, nimble, and had a tendency to panic first and ask questions never. Fossil beds show dozens of them packed together, suggesting that they traveled in herds. possibly gossiping about which bugs were tastiest or who had the shiniest scales. They weren't top predators. They weren't even particularly strong, but they were everywhere. And that, dear friend, is a kind of success too. Let's not forget the Dinosaurs. They had turtle beaks. They had tusks for no clear reason. They had bulky bodies and stubby tails, and looked like potatoes with legs. They waddled through the underbrush, chewing on leaves, snorting at danger, and somehow they held on through multiple extinction events. In fact, some Dinosaurs survived until the age of dinosaurs was well underway. An impressive feat for something that looked like a living beanbag. And now, may I introduce a creature who absolutely deserves her own sitcom, Charavipteryx. Yes, that's a real name. Charavipteryx was a tiny gliding reptile, but instead of wings on her arms like a normal aerial creature, she had her wings on her legs. That's right, a flying triangle with thighs. When she leapt from tree to tree, she looked like a floating kite made by a distracted child. But you know what? She could steer in the air, and she survived. Never underestimate the power of awkward innovation. And just in case you thought Earth had run out of strange, let's talk about Tanystropheus. At first glance, it's just another reptile. Then you notice the neck. It's as long as the rest of its body combined. Tanystropheus had a 3-meter neck with only 13 vertebrae, each one stretched like taffy. His body was short and strong, like someone built a lizard out of leftovers from a crane. Scientists aren't even sure how it moved. Did it swim? Did it sneak its neck into tidipools from the shore like a fishing rod? Did it just flop and hope? We still don't fully know, and that's part of the beauty. All of these creatures, the squat, the spindly, the panicked and peculiar, they thrived, not because they were perfect, but because they were willing to be different. And in the world just after extinction, being different wasn't a weakness. It was the only way forward. There's something healing in that, isn't there? We're often told to be strong, to be the fastest, the smartest, the most prepared. But the Triassic says, you can also be weird. You can be unsure, unshiny, unfinished, and still worthy of survival. You can look like a walking meatball and still change the world. You can be anxious and awkward and still pave the way for giants. And speaking of giants, let's peek ahead, just briefly, because among all these oddballs, giants are coming. The early sauropodomorphs, long-necked ancestors of creatures like Brachiosaurus, are starting to grow, slowly, cautiously, but with potential in their bones. They are not giants yet, but they dream big, and evolution listens to dreamers. Meanwhile, in the skies, tiny pterosaurs begin to flap for the first time. Their wings, made of stretched skin and delicate bone, catch the Triassic wind. They swoop, they glide, they squeak and dart like children discovering playgrounds for the first time. The sky has never known vertebrates before, but now it does, and it will never be the same. So yes, dear listener, this chapter of Earth story might look odd. It's full of creatures that don't make sense, that don't look designed, or balanced, or refined, but they are alive. And in the wake of devastation, life, any kind, any shape, is a miracle. They teach us that there is no single way to be worthy of this world. You don't have to be majestic. You don't have to be graceful. You don't even have to know what you're doing. You just have to be here, to wake up, to keep going, to try again, even if your wings are on your legs. So if tonight you feel strange, or out of place, or like you're walking through the world in a body that doesn't quite fit, you're in excellent company. So many of Earth's greatest survivors were misfits first. You are not late. You are not lacking. You are a part of this long, funny, sacred story of becoming. And just like them, you're evolving in your own way, at your own pace. Close your eyes now. Let the creatures of the Triassic tiptoe through your dreams. Let Coelophysis dash and Charavipteryx glide, and Tanystropheus stretch its neck just beyond the edge of the sky. The world has room for all of them. It has room for you too. Sleep deeply, knowing that being a little odd might be your greatest gift. Because in the tale of Earth, it's the weird ones who make history. Part 2. The Rebuilders of the Earth. 1. Return to the deep sea. Shoot, can you hear it? The sea is breathing again. Not with the thunder of waves, not yet, but with soft pulses, like the beating of a slow, waking heart. After the silence of extinction, after the smothering clouds and poisoned skies, the ocean dares to exhale. This is not the same sea you knew before. This is not the ancient Carboniferous reef or the bustling Permian shelf. This is a sea reborn, wounded, wandering, but whispering with life once more. In the wake of silence, the great dying had not spared the oceans. Over 90% of marine life gone. Entire food webs dismantled. The coral reefs vanished. The plankton, barely a shimmer in the water. Even the oxygen, the breath of the sea, had retreated into darkness. The ocean had become a grave, its surface still and sunless, its depth stagnant and sour. But even in graves, seeds can slumber. And in the Triassic, the sea began to dream again. The first spark, a plankton's prayer. Before fish, before predators, before coral castles or shelled wanderers, there came something almost invisible. Phytoplankton, tiny suncatchers, floating freely in the upper waters. They returned first. Their cells drank the light, exhaled oxygen, and fed the very fabric of the food chain. They were the match that lit the deep. And from their spark a ripple began. One by one, the small ones followed. Radiolarians, delicate skeletons drifting like alien snowflakes. Foraminifera, shelled dreamers of the seafloor. Diatoms, algae, cyanobacteria, like lacework beneath the surface. They wove a new tapestry, fine and intricate, layer by layer, molecule by molecule, breathing color and possibility back into the blue. The return of the swimmers. And then the fish came. Not the armored giants of the Devonian, not the placoderms or jawless specters of old, but something sleeker, faster, lighter, ray-finned fish. You've seen their descendants in rivers and oceans today. Goldfish, salmon, tuna, perch. But back in the Triassic, they were pioneers of a new kind of elegance. Fins like ribbons, bones light but strong, a way of swimming that sliced through water like silk. In a sea that needed movement, they became poetry in motion. They hunted, they darted, they shoaled. Some flashed silver beneath the sun. Others glowed with twilight blues deeper below. They gave rise to predators and prey. They painted motion across still waters. They invited the sea to dance again. Dreams with fins, the rise of marine reptiles. But not all dancers had gills. From the land, still healing, still cracked and dry, came a few brave wanderers who looked at the sea and saw not a mystery, but a homecoming. They slid in slowly, hesitantly, breath held. limbs stretched, and over time, the waves claimed them. Marine reptiles were born. Among the earliest was the Nothosaur, long-bodied, paddle-limbed, with a head like a crocodile and teeth like secrets. They swam like serpents, lunging from shallows to snatch passing fish. They were neither fish nor lizard, but something in between, something liminal, something magical. They reminded the sea that grace could come from anywhere, even from land. Later would come plesiosaurs, ichthyosaurs, and more. But the Nothosaurs were first, the experimental sketches of nature's next marine masterpiece. They glided through the waves, like dreams half remembered, strange, silent, startlingly beautiful, coral castles reimagined. Once, the oceans had been dotted with coral metropolises, reefs made of limestone and time, but the end Permian extinction had swept them clean, leaving only rubble and memory. Now, in the Triassic, something stirred beneath the tide. Not the same corals, not yet, but microbial reef builders, like ancient architects of slime and stone, began the slow work of rebuilding. Layer by living layer, they raised small mounds, then ridges, then low reefs. These weren't the dazzling rainbow cities we know today. They were humble, soft-hued, fragile, but they offered shelter to mollusks, to crabs, to small darting fish and coiled ammonites. And slowly they taught the ocean how to be a home again. Shadows of the deep, in the dimmer waters, where sunlight softened to a murmur, sharks, those old survivors, still cruised. They had seen the Permian, they had seen extinction, and yet they had endured. Smaller now, quieter, but still present. Triassic sharks weren't the terrors of Hollywood fame. They were modest, fast, agile, cautious, but they remembered the old rhythms, the hunt, the drift, the scent of movement in water. They were living fossils in a sea becoming new. The rebuilders multiply. With every new breath of the sea, more came to join the resurrection. Ammonites, spiral-shelled cephalopods with brilliant eyes, bivalves, clams and mussels that filtered and breathed, crinoids, feathered creatures waving gently on stalks. They returned not all at once, but as a choir might, one voice, then another, then a harmony. The ocean was no longer silent. It hummed, pulsed, it shimmered. Even in the darkest trenches, tiny worms danced, microbes glowed. The deep sea found its heartbeat again. The ocean as womb. Let us not forget, the ocean was our first home, cradled life when earth was barren. It birthed the spine, the eye, the nerve, and now, after its great grief, it was healing again. It didn't rebuild in rage. It didn't demand anything. It just began again, with breath and salt and tide. There is something holy in this rhythm, something deeply forgiving. Even after devastation, the sea chooses life. Even after being emptied, it gives again. Even now, it holds the bones of the lost and the songs of the living. What the sea teaches us. If your life has known silence, if your soul has sunk too deep, if you've forgotten how to breathe, look to the Triassic Sea. It knows. It remembers what it means to be emptied, to go still, to lose everything. And yet, it returned. Not perfectly, not immediately, but fully, eventually. So close your eyes now. Let the waves rock you. Let the salt cleanse you. There is a world beneath the surface, still rooting for you, still breathing with you, still dreaming of your healing. Like plankton, like nothosaurs, like fish with ribbons for fins. You too can begin again, softly, silently, surely. Two reptiles rise and choose their paths. The sea had remembered how to dream. Now it was time for the land to remember how to walk. The earth was still wounded. Her skin cracked from the ancient fires, her forests blackened by storms of ash and sorrow. But even the scorched soil held promises. And somewhere beneath the crust of silence, tiny claws began to stir. They were not mighty yet, not magnificent. They were small, hesitant creatures shaped by survival. But these were not the old reptiles of the Permian. No, these were new architects of the land, and their story would ripple forward across time. The first footsteps on ash. In the early Triassic, long after the Permian fires faded, the land was quiet, open, and dangerous. Few plants had returned. The air was hot, the rain still acidic in many places. But the emptiness meant one thing: space to explore. And into that space stepped the survivors, a strange blend of reptilian bodies, each with its own plan for the future. They crept, they climbed, they scurried. Some had long tails and snouts. Others wore bone armor. Some glided silently through trees. But among them, a particular group was already whispering something different, something destined for greatness. They were called the Archosaurs, meaning ruling reptiles. And oh, how they would rule. Archosaurs, the drama queens of evolution. Archosaurs were not alone on the land. They shared the earth with therapsids, our mammal-like ancestors, and with other kinds of lizards and reptiles. But the Archosaurs, they were dramatic. They split into two major groups, and each one would carve a destiny of its own. One group, bold and power-hungry, leaned toward speed and upright walking. They were the Avametatarsalia, which would eventually give rise to the dinosaurs and the birds. The other group preferred a heavier, semi-aquatic life. They became the Pseudosuchia, the ancestors of the crocodiles. It was like a fairy tale of old friends parting ways, each walking into a different fate. You go chase the skies, one might have said. I'll guard the swamps, said the other, and off they went. Early dinosaurs, small, swift, and shy. Now, we must not picture T. Rex just yet. In the Triassic, early dinosaurs were small. Some were the size of chickens. Others, like Coelophysis, were lean and lightweight, zipping through underbrush on two legs. They were not yet kings, but they were clever. They walked upright, freeing their arms. They moved fast, often in groups. They were opportunists, finding meals where others starved. And above all, they were adaptable. In a world that was still shifting, they bent, but did not break. These early dinosaurs were not just survivors. They were dreamers with claws, testing the winds, scouting the rocks, waiting for the moment the earth would be ready to crown them. Crocodile cousins, the quiet power. On the other side of the Archosaur family tree, their crocodilian cousins were also busy. But instead of speed, they chose stealth. Instead of chasing, they waited. These early Pseudosuchians weren't quite the crocodiles we know, but they had already discovered the power of patience. Some were armored like tanks. Others stood on two legs and sprinted after prey. They experimented. Some tried grazing. Others became fierce predators. One even developed a sail on its back like a prehistoric solar panel. But in time, only the patient ones remained. The ambushers, the lurkers, they became masters of the murky waters, and eventually evolved into the crocodiles and alligators of today. and still they wait, as silent as stone, as timeless as time, the whisper of feathers. Now, let's tiptoe quietly into something magical. Among those small, upright dinosaurs, a few began to change their scales. At first, the changes were subtle. Tiny filaments for insulation, perhaps to warm hatchlings or trap body heat in the cold night. But soon they became more feather-like, and though it would take millions of years, those feathers would carry them skyward. Yes, this is where birds began. Not in flocks or songs, but in small steps, in downy fluff and daring leaps, in bone structure shifting just slightly enough to whisper to the wind. Evolution is a slow storyteller. It builds miracles one soft click at a time. What began in the Triassic as warm fuzz would someday become wings and wonder, eggs and empires. Reptiles of this age weren't just changing outside. Inside, their parenting was shifting too. They laid eggs, yes, but some began to protect them. A few guarded nests, others hid them carefully. Even this small behavior was revolutionary, because where there is care, there is a future. We cannot see these creatures as cold or mechanical. They were building lineages. They were crafting legacy. Every clawed footstep, every egg tucked in sand, was a declaration. We will not end here. A world of walkers. Not all Triassic reptiles were destined to become famous. Some remained small and strange. There were the rhynchosaurs, with their beaked faces and digging limbs. There were the aetosaur, heavily armored herbivores that looked like walking pine cones. And there were the proterosaurs, with long necks that stretched impossibly far, like the Earth's first giraffes. They did not leave behind movie franchises or museum halls, but they walked this Earth with quiet dignity. They too were part of the great rebuilding. Earth takes a breath. As these reptiles spread, the land slowly softened. Plants returned, seed ferns, conifers, cycads. Their green welcomed shade, and shade welcomed insects. The air cooled. Rivers ran clearer. The world, still aching, began to breathe again. And reptiles, those ancient wanderers, became the lungs of movement across the continents. One giant supercontinent. Let's pause to look at the stage they walked upon. Back then, all the continents were joined into one. Pangea, a giant, rugged canvas stretching pole to pole. It was vast, dry, and seasonal, harsh in places, humid in others. But for reptiles, it was the perfect playground. There were no oceans to block their migration, no walls between east and west. From deserts to floodplains, they walked across this world like whispers growing louder. What these reptiles teach us: they did not rise in triumph. They rose from ruin. They did not inherit an easy earth. They inherited a broken one. And yet, they spread. They diversified. They dared to change. Some sprouted armor. Some grew feathers. Some leapt. Some lurked. They didn't agree on a single path. And that was their strength. From a single origin came crocodiles, birds, dinosaurs, and more. So perhaps you too don't need one perfect path. Perhaps you just need a reason to keep moving forward. Drift towards sleep. So close your eyes now and walk beside them in your dreams. Hear the soft footfalls of ancient cousins, treading across silent valleys. Imagine the gentle chirp of the first feathered ones, huddling against a Triassic breeze. Let the Earth's patience be your comfort. Let the reptile's resilience be your guide. Not all journeys must be loud. Not all rebirths must be sudden. Sometimes, they arrive on quiet feet, beneath the stars. And so did they, and so may you. 3 plants begin to dream, while the oceans whispered their salty lullabies, and the first land reptiles crept boldly across sunlit stones. Another, quieter miracle was taking root. Beneath the feet of archosaurs, beneath the claws of coelophysis, beneath the wind-drawn wings of gliders and pterosaurs, something green and small stirred in silence. It did not roar. It did not leap. It simply reached softly toward the sun. The earth, so scarred by fire and death just millions of years ago, now dared to dream in green again. There was no applause for this act, no trumpeting fanfare, only a seed splitting open, a root whispering downward, a shoot stretching upward. This is how forests begin, not with force, but with faith. The return of the seed-bearers. The first to rise were the gymnosperms, plants with naked seeds, brave and bare in the breeze. No need for water to carry their offspring now. No reliance on ponds or rain puddles like the ancient ferns. These pioneers had evolved a quiet genius. The seed, protective coat, compact promise, a little vessel of hope, capable of waiting, surviving, awakening, when the world was kind again. Conifers were among the boldest dreamers. You know them today as pines, firs, and spruces. But back then, they were the architects of the first post-extinction forests. Needle-leaved and resinous, their foliage didn't wilt in drought. Their roots pierced dry earth. Their cones whispered secrets to the wind. And the wind obliged, carrying pollen like love letters from one tree to another. It played matchmaker for a whole world rebuilding itself, one branch at a time. Among these early green giants was Voltsia, a conifer ancestor whose spiraling leaves waved like hands in slow dance. It didn't grow tall overnight. It didn't dominate. It simply endured, and in enduring it flourished. Next came the cycads, ancient plants with thick, stubby trunks, and fronds that looked like palm leaves but weren't. To stand among them was to feel like a time traveler. Royal, still prehistoric. Their sturdy bodies stored water, while their leaves reached upward like prayerful fingers. They didn't need much, just light, just space, just enough peace to begin again. The quiet kingdom beneath the dinosaurs. As trees returned, the world became softer. Insects once again had places to land. Moss crept across shaded stones. Tiny fungi, the silent recyclers, knit themselves into the roots of the trees, exchanging minerals for sugar, building networks underground like whispers shared between old friends. And soon, the forests hummed, not with noise, but with life. The Triassic forests were not yet thick, not yet mighty like the jungles of the Jurassic to come, but they were sacred in their fragility, newborn ecosystems, swaddled in sunlight and quiet perseverance. Among them walked the first herbivorous reptiles. You can imagine them stepping carefully, their claws brushing against ferns, their nostrils quivering at the scent of resin. They grazed on tender leaves. Some likely ate cycads, some crushed cones with thick jaws. Others nibbled from the forest floor, but all of them were fed by dreams that had grown from dust. Leaves as lullabies. To live is to be nourished, but to be nourished in stillness by something that never moves is a miracle. Trees don't hunt, they don't flee, they stand, and yet they offer shelter, food, protection, and peace. Their leaves rustle like lullabies in the wind. Their roots stabilize the world beneath our feet, and their trunks offer perches, shade, and stillness for all who pause near them. In the Triassic, their role was no different. They were not the stars of the show, but without them, there would be no stage. Somewhere in those gentle groves, the first ginkgo ancestors unfurled their fan-shaped leaves, elegant, delicate, as if designed by moonlight. Even now, the ginkgo remains one of Earth's oldest living trees, a time traveler among us, a green whisper from the Triassic to your street corner. In the dreams of these trees, the future was already blooming, resilience in silence. One might look at a conifer and think, it does nothing, it just stands. But that is the wisdom of plants, to change without rushing, to evolve without chasing. When the earth became drier, their needles narrowed. When herbivores arrived, they grew sap and thorns. When the soil shifted, their roots adapted. No drama, no panic, just slow, meaningful change. They didn't resist the world, they partnered with it. And that, perhaps, is the deepest lesson of all. The forest as dreamscape. The Triassic forests weren't just places to eat or hide. They were dreamscapes, canopies where birds had not yet flown, but where whispers of flight were already coiling in the branches. Underbrush where mammals had not yet scampered, but where warm-blooded futures were already curled, waiting. Each tree was a time capsule, its rings holding not just age, but memory, memory of flame, memory of drought, memory of resilience. And yet still, they grew. Beneath the branches, life gathered. Early insects, burrowing lizards, small amphibians seeking shade. The forest became a mosaic of coexistence. Every trunk was a pillar, every cone a possibility, every root a promise. And in time, these forests stitched the broken earth back together. Not with force, not with dominance, but with patience. What trees remember, if you could place your hand on the bark of a Triassic conifer, if you could close your eyes and listen, not with ears, but with your bones, you might hear, I have seen extinction, I have heard the silence, but I did not stop growing. Plants remember, they remember fire, and still they grow new shoots. They remember darkness, and still they reach for light. They do not rage against the world, they adapt to it, and in doing so, they heal it. The dream of the flower still to come. The forests of the Triassic held one more secret, one more longing that had not yet bloomed. The flower, still centuries of millennia away, still a dream waiting in the genes of green. But you can feel it there, in the spirals of cones, in the symmetry of leaves, in the scent of pine resin warmed by sun. A yearning, promise, that one day the world would blossom, and that beauty would beget beauty in colors and perfumes not yet imagined. Lessons from the forest. So here you are, listener beneath the leaves, wanderer of ancient time, dreamer of soft things, and perhaps your life too feels scorched. Perhaps you too have survived a kind of extinction, loss, hardship, isolation. Perhaps you too feel like a seed, tucked into soil, unsure if it's time to rise. Then hear this, the forest does not ask you to rush. It only asks you to be faithful to the light, to unfurl when ready, to root deeply, to trust that life returns. Even after fire, you don't have to bloom all at once. You don't have to bear fruit today. You only need to begin, like a tree, like a cone, like a green dream in the middle of a recovering world. So sleep now, dear one. Let the leaves rustle lullabies above you. Let the resin-sweet wind carry your breath away. Let your roots sink into peace. The Triassic trees stand watch, and tomorrow you will grow again, not in noise, not in haste, but in strength and in stillness, like the plants that began to dream. Part 3. When dinosaurs ran their first experiments. 1. The first children of the dinosaurs. Once upon a time, long before T-Rex ever roared and long before Triceratops stood proud with its shielded face, the Earth hosted a quieter classroom, a school of evolutionary experiments. It was not a school with chalkboards or textbooks, but one paved in sun-baked mud and cooled by Triassic winds. A school where every student was a species, every test was a struggle for life, and every graduation meant survival. And so, welcome, dear dreamer, to this prehistoric classroom where some of the very first dinosaurs nervously tiptoed into existence. They weren't the giants, you know, not yet. They were small, quick, bright-eyed, and often outnumbered. But they were curious and clever and unlike anything the Earth had ever seen. Meet Heterosaurus and Coelophysis, the first daring students. In the late Triassic, the evolutionary bell rang, and two bright pupils stepped forward. Heterosaurus was one of the earliest known dinosaurs, sleek and sharp, about as long as a human is tall. With three-toed feet and a long, balancing tail, it sprinted through South American floodplains like a hungry honor student late to lunch. Its name means Herrera's lizard, named after the rancher who first found its bones. But we prefer to call it the class representative of dinosaur ambition. Then came Coelophysis, even slimmer, faster, and more widespread. It had hollow bones. That's what Coelophysis means. Long legs and keen eyes that missed nothing, like the cleverest kid in class who finishes the assignment before you found a pencil. And they weren't alone. Their Triassic classroom was full of other strange students, most of them not dinosaurs. There were the Rhynchosaurs, plant-eating, beaked reptiles that looked like a mashup between a parrot and a tank. And the Rawasuchians, large, crocodile-like predators with teeth like daggers and an attitude to match. So our dino duo? They had competition. Serious competition. An evolutionary drama in the making. Imagine the scene like a schoolyard at recess. On one end, Heterosaurus chases lizards and small prey, skittering over ferny ground like a track star with claws. Near the edge of a swamp, Coelophysis weaves through a crowd, dashing between the legs of larger creatures, always watching, always learning. Across the yard, a Rawasuchian stomps like the grumpy older kid who's been held back 3 grades and now rules the swing set with brute force. Nearby, a Rhynchosaur munches on ferns, grumbling like a wise vegetarian who's seen too much to be bothered with drama. And above it all, the Earth watches, waiting to see who will thrive and who will quietly fade into extinction's arms. Small body, big idea. Here's something beautiful. Heterosaurus and Coelophysis were small, yes, but their size was an advantage. In a post-apocalyptic Triassic world recovering from the Permian extinction, resources were scarce and weather was unpredictable. And in such a world, being small meant a needing less food, hiding more easily, a moving faster, a growing up quicker. They weren't just surviving, they were learning how to adapt, even as the ground beneath them still whispered of volcanoes and extinction past. They were like Earth startup companies, innovative, lean, sometimes chaotic, but bursting with potential. The curriculum of change. In this evolutionary classroom, the lessons weren't easy. Adapt to the weather. Dry seasons burned the land. Flash floods came without warning. Learn to hunt or hide. You were either predator or prey, or clever enough to be both. Never stop moving. The world was wide, and Pangaea's connected lands meant new opportunities, but also new threats. Herosaurus and Coelophysis passed many of these tests, while others, like the once dominant Rhynchosaurs, began failing pop quizzes in evolution. You see, Rhynchosaurs had once flourished, but they relied on certain types of plants that didn't always come back. And they weren't very adaptable when diets changed. Rauisuchians? Powerful, yes, but bulky. They needed more food and couldn't match the agility of the new class of predators. The dinosaurs, by contrast, were like flexible students with curious minds. They weren't born valedictorians, but they knew how to learn. The secret weapon: upright posture. Let's talk about something deceptively simple: how you walk. Dinosaurs, even the earliest ones like Herosaurus and Coelophysis, had upright posture. Their legs sat directly beneath their bodies, not sprawled out to the sides like lizards or crocodile cousins. This meant a more efficient movement, faster running, longer travel distances, less energy wasted. It was like switching from a tricycle to a racing bike. And while other reptiles trudged awkwardly, the early dinosaurs began gliding across land like whispers. It was subtle, but it changed everything. In the long exam that is evolution, sometimes all it takes is one clever answer. Not all who roam are meant to rule. Now, not every dinosaur in the class became a world changer. Some experiments simply didn't make it. There were small offshoots with strange hips, others with odd teeth that didn't quite match their diets. Some were simply unlucky, wrong time, wrong place, wrong flood. And that's okay. Evolution doesn't punish failure. It learns from it. Every little dinosaur that tried and vanished helped shape the ones that would follow. They were the rough drafts of tyrants and flyers, of herbivores and thunder-footed giants. Even when the story ends early, it still adds a page to the book of life, a snapshot in time. Let's pause and take a gentle picture in your mind. A dusty clearing in late afternoon light. Herosaurus, sleek and alert, stalks through the scrub, its breath misting in the air. Coelophysis, not far off, twitches its tail like a cat sensing a secret. A Rauisuchian bellows in the distance, its shadow long and fading. The ferns sway, and above, the clouds drift over Pangaea, a world balanced on the edge of legacy. The giants have not yet come. The air does not yet thunder with sauropod steps. But here, in this quiet moment, the seed of dynasty has been planted. Why this chapter matters? You might wonder, why spend time with these tiny, almost forgotten dinosaurs? Because beginnings matter. Because it's here, in the quiet corners of time, that the greatest stories are born. Herosaurus and Coelophysis didn't know they were starting something big. They didn't strut like emperors or roar like tyrants. They simply lived, adapted, tried, and in trying, they opened doors for millions of years of wonder. We often celebrate the bold victories, but in nature and in life, it's the quiet experiments that pave the way. Drift gently to sleep. So now, as the Triassic twilight deepens, and the classroom of life grows still, let yourself rest. Let your mind wander to a starlit plain, where small dinosaurs chase fireflies between ferns, where every footstep is a question, and every answer, a new species waiting to bloom. Sleep, dear listener, with the comfort of knowing Even in a world full of Rawasukians and storms, the little ones with bright eyes and brave hearts found a way forward, and so will you, too, who are the true survivors. Not every legend begins with a roar. Some begin with a whisper, a rustle beneath the ferns, a flicker of movement in the shade, a quiet footstep not meant to be noticed. And in the Triassic, when the world was still raw from extinction, when fire and flood had not yet loosened their grip, it was not the strongest who survived, but the most aware. So tonight, dear dreamer, we won't follow the biggest teeth or the loudest bellows. We will follow the quiet ones, the ones who knew how to watch, how to wait, and how to leave the fight before the first stone was thrown. Because the true survivors of this ancient world were not always those who conquered. They were those who endured, a world still healing. In the last chapter, we met the first small dinosaurs, Herosaurus coelophysis. Quick, light, curious. But the Triassic was still filled with giants of the past. The Rawasukians, towering meat-eaters, the Phytosaurs, ancient crocodile-like beasts lurking in swamps, and massive amphibians, some bigger than a grown man. The Earth itself was unstable. Volcanoes smoldered. Seasons were extreme. One year brought monsoons, the next a choking drought. Life was a gamble, and yet some creatures found ways to thrive. But not by being the loudest, not by being the fiercest. They survived by being clever, quiet, and invisible when it counted. Size doesn't equal strength. Let's take a closer look at a creature called Lajurpatin. Not a dinosaur, yet a close cousin. It was small, delicate, probably weighed less than a modern house cat. But oh, it was sharp. Its back legs were strong for leaping, its senses alert to the smallest sound. Lajurpatin didn't try to fight Rawasukians. It didn't need to. It lived in the margins. The underbrush, the tree line, the cracks between danger and safety. In a world filled with predators, Lajurpatin survived by knowing when to vanish. And maybe you too, dear listener, have felt small in a world of giants. Perhaps you've learned how to quietly observe, to choose your moments, to slip away from noise that isn't meant for you. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. The ancestors of flight. Far above the forest floor, another quiet miracle was forming. Small reptiles like Scleromochlus, lanky, bipedal, light-footed. Some scientists believe they may have given rise to a future wonder, the pterosaurs, and among the tiny, fast-moving creatures darting through foliage were the early archosaurs whose lineage would one day become birds. At this time, they couldn't fly, but they could climb, jump, glide, escape. Flight did not come from brute force, came from lightness, from giving up the ground to reach the sky. And sometimes, healing in your own life means that too. Letting go of what weighs you down, to rise where others cannot follow. Hiding is a strategy, not a shame. There's something we don't talk about enough. The power of knowing when to hide. In the animal kingdom, hiding isn't cowardice. It's a life-saving art. Small burrowing animals, some no bigger than mice, may have waited underground during drought, fire, and predator frenzy. They slept through the chaos. They woke when the storms were over. They were not lazy, they were wise. And for us too, there are times when pulling back isn't weakness. There's strength in silence. There's courage in waiting. There's power in saying, "Not now." The Triassic reminds us, the ones who lived to tell the story were not always those in the spotlight. Sometimes they were the ones beneath the soil, quietly healing, quietly preparing. The rise of the nimble dinosaurs. Let's go back to Coelophysis. It wasn't the strongest predator, but it was fast, adaptable, attentive. It traveled in groups. It hunted in packs. It likely watched the big predators fight each other, then slipped in later to scavenge. A little trickster, a survivor, a strategist, and that's a lesson for us all. You don't have to win every argument. You don't have to conquer every mountain. Sometimes the smartest thing to do is let the storm pass, let the tyrants roar, then step forward once the dust has settled. Coelophysis did just that, and it would go on to become one of the most successful dinosaurs of the late Triassic. History remembers the resilient. Many of the big creatures of the Triassic didn't make it. The Rauisuchians? Extinct. The massive amphibians? Gone. But the small ones, the watchers, the listeners, the light-footed ones, they survived because they knew something very few understand. To live long, you must not only be brave, you must be wise and kind to your own energy. So many of us burn out trying to shine the brightest, but maybe the ones who glow gently in the dark are the ones who last the longest, healing in the shadows. If tonight you feel tired, like the world is too loud, too fast, too demanding, let this chapter be your permission to rest in the shade, to step back without guilt, to survive on your own terms. The Triassic world was not forgiving, but the ones who listened to their limits, who learned how to bend without breaking, they are the ones who gave rise to everything that came next. You don't need to prove yourself in every storm. You just need to know when to pause, like a tiny dinosaur under a leaf, like a reptile climbing into a tree at dusk, like a heart that chooses peace over performance, a night in the forest. So let us leave you now, in a quiet corner of the Triassic forest. You're lying beneath fern fronds. The moon is full above Pangaea. Somewhere nearby, Coelophysis chases fireflies with friends. A Rauisuchian grumbles far away, but it does not see you. You are safe. You are enough. You are still here. You may not be the loudest voice. You may not take up the most space, but you are clever, gentle, thoughtful, and worthy of continuing the story, just like the survivors of the Triassic, just like the ones who didn't roar, but still rewrote the earth. 3. Laughing with fate. Before they were called dinosaurs, they didn't know they were going to be famous. They didn't know their bones would one day sit in museums, with crowds of children pointing at them and whispering, "Wow, look at the size of that one." They didn't know there would be books, movies, theme parks, and bedtime stories like this one. They were just trying to survive. So tonight, let's take a gentler look at these early reptiles, not as monsters or icons, but as ordinary creatures who had no idea they were walking toward legend. Because the word dinosaur, that wouldn't even exist for another 200 million years. And if you had whispered it in their ears back then, they probably would have just blinked and gone back to chasing bugs. The creatures without a name. You see, the early Triassic reptiles we now label dinosaurs weren't exactly aware of their future fame. No one had invented the word yet. No one had organized the taxonomy. There were no science fairs, no paleontologists in khaki hats scribbling in notebooks. Back then, you were just an animal, a hungry one, a nervous one, living in a chaotic world full of lava, swamps, and things with bigger teeth than yours. So these creatures, Coelophysis, Herrerasaurus, Eoraptor, They weren't auditioning for the role of terrible lizard. They were just showing up, trying things, failing, getting eaten, sometimes making it another day. And that, dear dreamer, is often how greatness begins, not with a plan, but with persistence. Evolution as trial and error. The Triassic was like a science fair, without adult supervision. Everyone was experimenting. Nature was in a frantic rush to fill all the empty spots left by extinction. Need a predator? Try long teeth, or short teeth, or no teeth but really fast legs. Need a herbivore? How about a beak, or a sail, or just a really big stomach? Everything was on the table. Some of these ideas were brilliant. Others were, let's say politely, temporary. There were crocodile-like archosaurs that galloped. There were reptiles with beaks but no teeth. There were creatures that looked like dinosaurs but were not quite. Some lines ended almost immediately. Others lasted just long enough to pass a spark to the next generation. Evolution doesn't hand out trophies. It just keeps the ones who adapt. You don't have to know who you'll become. Let's pause a moment, because maybe, just maybe, you've had days where you're not sure who you're becoming. You've tried things. They didn't work. You've stumbled through ideas and identities, not knowing what fits, what lasts, what's you. And maybe you think everyone else has it figured out. But look at the early dinosaurs. They didn't know they'd one day be kings of the Cretaceous. They didn't know they'd wear crowns made of thunder and teeth. They were just messy little creatures, trying to find food and not get squashed. You don't need to know your final form to be on the right path. Sometimes just being here, still growing, still trying, is more than enough. Clumsy beginnings are still beginnings. Have you ever watched a baby animal learn to walk? Wobbly, awkward, falling more than standing. That was the early dinosaur world. Feet too long, tails too heavy, jaws that weren't quite strong enough to hold on to dinner. But they kept walking, they kept running, they kept learning. They didn't look at themselves and say, well, I guess I'm not cut out for this predator thing. They just adapted. And you're allowed to be awkward. You're allowed to be unsure. That doesn't mean you're failing. That means you're in motion. They just wanted to eat, sleep, and not die. Despite what modern cartoons might suggest, Triassic dinosaurs weren't strutting around posing for fossils. They weren't chasing humans. We didn't exist yet. They weren't performing dramatic duels in the sunset. They were chasing bugs, nibbling ferns, running from things bigger than them, sleeping under logs, sniffing the air for danger, sometimes accidentally stepping in mud they'd never escape. In short, they were just living. They didn't know they were the blueprint for T-Rex. They didn't know they were the spark that would become birds in the sky. They were just trying to make it, one day at a time. Isn't that a bit like us? A name is just a story waiting to be told. When you hear the word dinosaur, you think of a story, a myth, a legend. But the word didn't arrive until the 1800s. From the Greek, Deinos, terrible, and Sauros, lizard. It was coined by Sir Richard Owen, long after the creatures were gone. So for millions of years, they lived and died without knowing their place in history. No one cheered for them. No one painted murals of their glory. They weren't dinos. They were just them. And still, they mattered. You too might not have a title yet. You may not know how your story is remembered. But that doesn't mean it isn't worth living. A little humor helps when you're confused. If you could go back and ask a Coelophysis, "Hey, did you know you're part of one of the most successful lineages in Earth's history?" It would probably tilt its head, blink, and run off after a cricket. If you told a Herosaurus, "Smile, one day you'll be a fossil," it would probably just sneeze and keep walking. They didn't care about legacy. They cared about survival. They weren't wise. They weren't proud. They were just trying. So if you're confused today, laugh a little, wiggle your metaphorical tail, shake off the pressure to become something. Sometimes, still here is the biggest achievement of all. What if your greatness hasn't been named yet? We are often so eager to label things: success, failure, purpose, meaning. But what if your greatness has no name yet? What if you're still walking through your own Triassic, not knowing what it's all for, but living the part that will one day become the beginning of everything? Dinosaurs weren't born dinosaurs. They became them through time, through struggle, through persistence. And you are not behind. You are not lost. You're just early in your story. And one day someone may look back and say, "This is where it all began." Sleepy sign off. So now, dear listener, close your eyes. Imagine the Earth 230 million years ago. It's warm. It smells like wet ferns and volcanic ash. A tiny reptile stirs beneath a tree. It stretches its limbs, unaware of the future. It yawns. It eats something small. It lives another day. You're not so different. You're moving through your own wild terrain. You don't know what name your journey will earn, but that doesn't mean it's not profound. So rest now, not because everything is figured out, but because you are becoming something beautiful. One breath at a time, one step at a time, one Triassic moment at a time. Good night, little creature of the stars. Tomorrow we dream again. Part 4. Climate, Drift, and Dreamlike Surprises. 1. When Pangea began to crack. Close your eyes, dear dreamer. Tonight, let us unfurl the world like an ancient scroll. Let us follow the cracks that whisper across the skin of the earth. The gentle sighs of a planet stretching beneath its own weight. For once, long ago, before oceans roared between continents, before mountain chains divided north from south, there was only one land, Pangea, a mighty name, as if spoken in sleep by the earth herself. It was vast, dry, and sunburnt, a lonely continent stitched together from all the scattered bones of the past. Its center so far from the sea that rain clouds often forgot it even existed. The wind howled across great deserts, and rivers, when they came, trickled like shy guests across stone floors. But change was always waiting, and change would come from beneath, the murmurs beneath our feet. Imagine a lullaby hummed by molten stone. For deep below Pangea, the mantle was restless, a great ocean of magma pressing and pulsing and dreaming, pushed slowly, relentlessly, like a child shifting under blankets in search of comfort. And above it, Pangea cracked, not all at once, but in tiny sighs, like porcelain under pressure. First, no one noticed. The lizards still sunned on their rocks. The cycads still swayed gently in the breeze. But deep underground, the earth had begun her quiet work. The crust stretched, valleys opened, tiny rifts formed, like laugh lines on the face of time. And through those openings, new worlds would be born, a map turning its pages. Let us pause here and imagine something soft, a map unfurling across your pillow. lines glowing faintly like constellations, edges shifting, drifting, as if the earth were dreaming of something new. That is how the continents began to drift, not with explosions or thunder, but with a gentle, unhurried grace. They pulled apart like paper soaking in rainwater. First, the northern half Laurasia, then the southern half Gondwana. They didn't rush. Continental drift takes millions of years, but the Earth has time. So do you. New climates, new choices. As the land broke, so did the weather. Where once a single dry wind swept across Pangaea, now patterns began to dance. Some regions became wetter, others drier still. In the east, monsoon rains kissed the soil, birthing ferns and streams and creatures who learned to leap between puddles. In the west, the heat lingered. The air grew still. Only the toughest survived, thick-skinned, cold-blooded, patient. This fragmentation of climate was not a curse. It was a canvas. Each region became a different classroom, different experiments, different results. And the creatures that adapted, they didn't just survive. They diversified. Life follows the cracks. Wherever the earth split, life followed like moss in broken stone. In the rift valleys, new rivers flowed. With them came fish, frogs, and insect swarms. Near the coastlines, reptiles grew sleek and fast, learning to dart through the underbrush or sneak along the tide. Some species stayed behind, choosing to master the heat. Others wandered into new lands, discovering unknown plants, new prey, gentler rains. This migration wasn't a conquest. It was exploration. And in each pocket of new land, life rewrote its story. Some lines flourished. Others ended, quietly, without applause. But the tale never stopped. When the world teaches by shifting, have you ever felt the ground beneath your life shift? Not literally, perhaps, but in your soul. A job changes, a relationship ends, a chapter closes, and suddenly, everything feels unfamiliar. That's what the animals of the Triassic faced. The land beneath them moved. The rains came late. The sun felt closer, or farther, or crueler. They didn't panic. They adapted. Some got smaller. Some got faster. Some dug. Some climbed. They didn't know what was coming. They just kept going. And that might be the truest lesson of all. Surprises in the margins. When a book cracks open, you never know what the next page might hold. And when continents crack, surprises appear in the margins. New islands, new archipelagos, new habitats for life to try something wild. Some of these surprises were gentle. A new flower blooming in volcanic ash. A tiny mammal, whiskers twitching, sniffing the world with cautious wonder. Others were strange. Two-headed amphibians, fish with teeth that looked like folding fans. Not every experiment made it, but everyone mattered, because from the weird comes the wonderful, and the earth, like any good storyteller, never wastes a page. Where would you go if the world was splitting? Let's dream together now. Imagine you are a small creature, nestled in the grass of Triassic Earth. The wind changes. The rains don't come. The trees begin to lean in unfamiliar directions. You have a choice. Stay and learn how to live in the dry, or walk and search for new skies. There is no right answer. The earth doesn't test you. She invites you. She offers new paths and trusts that you'll find your way. Just like now, you don't have to know the ending, just the next step. The beauty of being undone. Pangaea was never meant to last forever. It was always a story in motion, always meant to become something else. And perhaps so are you. Perhaps the version of you today was always meant to crack, so that something softer, stronger, more curious could step through, like land breaking to let the sea in, like rain falling on dry places, like continents letting go of each other, so that life could bloom in the spaces between. You are not breaking, you are becoming. Sleepy sign off. So now, as you settle under your blanket, imagine the world not as fixed, but as drifting, like a lullaby sung by stone. Picture the earth as a sleepy giant, turning in her bed, dreaming of mountains yet to rise, and oceans not yet born. Let the map unfold in your dreams. Let the cracks become rivers. Let the drift become dance. And you are part of that rhythm. You are not lost. You are moving always toward something new. Sleep gently, explorer. The world is still turning, and tomorrow another page awaits. Two finding their own way. In the hush of deep time, after the great silence of extinction, Earth stirred once more. The lands had cracked like ancient skin. The skies still remembered ash. And life began again. Tentatively, carefully, like a child learning to walk after a long illness. It was not loud. It was not grand. But it was real. And as the new Triassic world opened its sleepy eyes, some creatures began to find their own way. One family, many futures. Let's start with a family reunion. Somewhere in the warm dust of time, a group of reptiles began to split in different directions. This wasn't a fight. It was a quiet, natural divergence, a kind of evolutionary you do you. This group, they're called Archosaurs. Their name means ruling reptiles. But don't let the name fool you. They didn't all want the same throne. Some would become the early crocodilians, heavy, low-slung, with patience like stone. They preferred waiting near rivers, letting others rush while they just watched. Others took to the skies. Pterosaurs, with fingers stretched like dreams, crafted wings from skin and bone. They didn't need thunder to rule. They soared silently, carried by wind and wonder. But the boldest of all, the ones who looked at the dry land, the open plains, the untamed forest paths, they became the first dinosaurs, the quiet start of giants. Now wait, don't imagine giants yet. These early dinosaurs weren't kings. Not yet. They were small, slender, quick, creatures like Herosaurus and Coelophysis, only a few meters long, light on their toes, bright-eyed and hungry. They darted between the legs of older reptiles, dodged lumbering Rawasuchians, outpaced ancient Rhynchosaurs. They weren't powerful, but they were clever. They didn't conquer the world. They simply survived in the cracks. And sometimes, dear dreamer, that's the most powerful thing of all. Eggs and the art of becoming. To understand how these paths truly diverged, we must look at something small. Not bones, not teeth, but eggs. The way a creature chooses to begin life tells you everything about what it values. Some archosaurs laid soft, flexible eggs, hiding them in moist soil and walking away. Others developed hard-shelled eggs, durable and oxygen-rich, able to survive under sun and sand. And in rare moments, some stayed near their eggs. They watched, they waited, a shadow as shelter, a stillness as love. It wasn't just biology, it was strategy, and it was the beginning of care. Different roads, same map. It's funny, isn't it? How one family can go so many ways. The crocodilians chose armor, ambush, and ancient stillness. The pterosaurs chose lift, lightness, and the sky. The dinosaurs chose endurance, agility, and one day, yes, greatness. But at this moment in time, they were just a group of experimenters, trying things, failing sometimes, learning always. Some walked on 2 legs, some on 4, some ate plants, some hunted bugs. Each one carved a path, not by force, but by fitting the world they found. What survival really means. If you had walked through a Triassic forest, you wouldn't have pointed to a Coelophysis and said, "That's the future." You might have laughed. So skinny, so twitchy. Yet these were the ones who would last. Because they didn't try to dominate. They tried to adapt. And perhaps if you felt small lately, if you've been surviving quietly in your corner, watching others rush and roar, you're not failing. You're evolving. How the future was written. The world didn't pick winners by looks or strength. It whispered to each creature, "What can you become?" And those who listened, those who flexed, changed, those who dared to be different, they wrote the next pages of Earth's story. Some dinosaurs would later grow feathers. Others would thunder across continents. Some would die off. Some would become birds. Crocodilians would outlive empires. Pterosaurs would rise and fall like myths. There were no straight lines, only branches and brave decisions, just like life, just like you, your own path. Tonight, dear soul, as you lie wrapped in soft covers, feel the earth beneath you. You are part of this map, not separate, not lost. Your life may not follow the usual path, but that's okay. Evolution doesn't love perfection. It loves possibility. So whatever egg you are guarding, a hope, a project, a healing heart, trust that it matters, and trust that your strange, quiet way might be the beginning of something wonderful, endings that are really beginnings. In the warm dark of a Triassic night, an egg stirs, tiny claws press against shell, a heartbeat quickens, a breath not yet taken waits, and then, crack, not the end, but the start of a story. Maybe yours is coming too. Sleep well, little dreamer. You're not behind. You're becoming. 3. The sleepers and the opportunists. When the world is unstable, when the weather forgets its rhythm, when storms come in waves, and the sun forgets how to be kind, what do you do? Do you run? Do you dig? Do you hide? Or do you simply slow down? Tonight, let me tell you a soft story, not of heroes or monsters, not of battles or kings, but of the quiet ones, the ones who slept, and the ones who sprinted toward the light, knowing it might not last. A planet of extremes. In the middle Triassic, Earth was restless. The great supercontinent Pangaea stretched wide and dry, its heart scorched by heat, its edges battered by storms. Rain didn't fall in gentle seasons, came in floods or not at all. Rivers vanished, then came back in roaring madness. Forests bloomed, then burned. And in this uncertain world, life had to choose, wait or rush. The sleepers, masters of stillness. In the cooler corners of this turbulent land, some creatures found a sacred trick. Pause. These were the sleepers. When the heat became too much, when the drought cracked the soil, when the wind howled like a lost god, they dug, they curled into burrows, slowed their hearts, closed their eyes. Not dead, not gone, just asleep. Small amphibians, cousins of frogs and salamanders, learned to hibernate. They pressed into the cool mud, let their bodies cool, and dreamed through the chaos. Insects, too, found their rhythm. Some spun cocoons to wait out the dry. Some burrowed deep into tree bark, into the ground, into silence. Even early mammal-like reptiles, little furry shadows of things to come, may have hibernated, using darkness as a shield. And you know what? It worked. While the strong fell, while the fast burned out, the quiet ones endured, the opportunists runners in the storm. But not everyone chose sleep. Some chose speed. These were the opportunists. They didn't plan for tomorrow. They didn't wait for the storm to pass. They moved. They multiplied. They made the most of now. Tiny reptiles with quick legs and quicker minds. Insects that laid eggs by the thousands. Plants that dropped seeds at the first hint of rain. Their motto, live fast, die young, leave many children. Their bodies weren't built to last, but their genes were fast travelers. One hot week was enough. Enough to hatch, enough to mate, enough to send the next generation forward. Before the world changed again. It was risky, it was bold, it was brilliant, because in evolution, success is not about forever. It's about long enough. 2 rhythms, 1 song. And so the Triassic Earth sang 2 lullabies. One soft and slow. Sleep, little one. Wait until it's safe. And one quick and urgent. Go now. Run. There is no later. The sleepers conserved energy. They returned year after year. Their numbers stable, their habits deep. The opportunists surged like lightning, appearing, vanishing, over and over again. Neither was wrong. Both were beautiful. They were 2 poems of persistence, written in different tempos, the hidden strategy of rest. Sleep, in the world of evolution, is not laziness. It is wisdom. To know when to act is power, but to know when not to act, that is something deeper. Some early burrowing animals, like Lystrosaurus, may have survived extinction not because they fought harder, but because they paused. By hiding underground, by slowing down their lives, they outlived the chaos. You see, stillness is not always weakness. Sometimes it's the smartest move of all. The psychology of a planet. Imagine Earth as a mind that has suffered trauma, fires, extinctions, breaks in its memory. Now it is healing, slowly, unevenly, with sudden bursts of fear and wonder. Its creatures mirror this. Some are anxious, always moving. Some are depressed, sleeping through the worst. Some are resilient, finding balance. And all of them, just like all of us, are trying their best with what they have. Plants join the dance. Even the plants chose sides. Some became the sleepers, conifers and cycads, with thick waxy leaves, that resisted drought, that waited months for rain. Others were opportunists, tiny ferns, fast-growing shrubs, exploding with spores after every storm. Forests were mosaics of moods, patches of rest, bursts of fury, like your own life, perhaps, periods of quiet, followed by days of chaos, then back again, and through it all, growth. What about you? Maybe you are a sleeper. Maybe your body says, not today. Maybe you need rest, need stillness, need the soft dark. That's okay. Or maybe you are an opportunist right now, feeling energy, rushing to finish, to create, to bloom before the storm comes again. That's okay too. You are not wrong. You are not broken. You are a reflection of life, adapting in the only way you know how. Everything that pauses rises again. Think of seeds in winter. Think of bears in caves. Think of hearts healing slowly, under the surface, without noise. Nothing is wasted. Even rest is movement, if we let it be. And in the Triassic, between storms and silence, the world whispered this truth. To live is to find your rhythm, closing the chapter but not the story. Tonight you've heard a different kind of tale, not about roaring dinosaurs, not about glittering teeth or giant claws, but about the soft ones, the ones who waited, the ones who ran fast and burned bright, the ones who whispered instead of shouting. And maybe, just maybe, those are the stories that carry us through. Sleep now, little dreamer. You do not need to rush. You do not need to prove. Your rhythm is enough. Whether you are a sleeper or a sprinter, life finds you beautiful, because even in a world of chaos, your way of being is a kind of hope. Part 5: The friendship within the ecosystem. 1. The bond between leaves and feet. Close your eyes. Imagine a world freshly reborn. Its wounds from the great extinction still tender. Its soil still scented with ash and hope. A world where green has just begun to stretch again, and quiet footsteps stir across the land like lullabies. This is the Triassic. Not yet the age of giants, but the age of beginnings, of whispered alliances between sunlight, roots, hoofbeats, and claws. Tonight, we step into this soft rhythm, not through battles or rulers, but through a friendship as old as time. The quiet companionship between plants and animals, between leaves and feet. The first invitation: let there be green. After the chaos, the earth needed something gentle, something that didn't roar or bite, something that simply stood still and gave. And so the plants returned. In the moist corners of riversides, beneath storm-blown canopies, sprouted the pioneers of peace: conifers, cycads, ginkgos, and seed ferns. They were the quiet builders, turning sunlight into food, anchoring the soil, offering shade, offering shelter, like the quiet friend in your life, who never needs to be loud, but always brings comfort. Their gift was simple: here is food, here is balance. And soon someone would answer that invitation. The response: feet on the grass. In the open clearings where the conifers whispered, there came footsteps, not of predators, not yet, but of the gentle grazers, the early herbivores who looked at leaves, not as scenery, but as breakfast. Enter Plateosaurus, with its long neck reaching high into the trees. Rhynchosaurs with beak-like mouths built for chewing tough plants. Aetosaur, armored like tanks, but as peaceful as wandering cattle. They were not royalty, not the stars of history books, but they were the bridge between green silence and the coming drama of teeth. Their lives were simple: eat, walk, digest, survive. But in their simplicity, they held the system together. A cycle begins: plants feed the eaters. Let's pause here, because this moment, this exchange of sunlight turned into leaves, then leaves turned into flesh, is not just biology, it's poetry. It's a reminder that life is built on giving. The plants give their bodies, asking nothing in return but a little space, a little sunlight. The grazers receive, but in doing so, they also move seeds, fertilize soil, prune forests to let younger plants grow. It is not just consumption, it is participation. Like good friends, they shape each other gently. Enter the carnivore's balance through challenge. Now comes movement in the shadows. Not enemies, not villains, just the next step. The meat-eaters arrive. Postasuchus, a powerful Rawasukian, strides through the underbrush on pillar-like legs, sensing vibrations from grazing rhynchosaurs. Coelophysis, nimble and curious, hunts in loose packs, eyes sharp, belly empty. They are here not to destroy, but to keep balance. Because in nature, there is no cruelty, only cycles. Too many grazers, and the plants vanish. Too few grazers, and the land overgrows, blocking itself with tangled branches and decay. So the carnivores, in their elegant violence, are part of the dance. They chase, but never more than needed. They kill, but never for sport. And the grazers, they run, but always return. Predator and prey, not enemies, but dancers in an ancient waltz. The first web of life. What we are witnessing, dear dreamer, is the first modern ecosystem. Not just isolated animals or trees, but a network of life, woven with patience, stitched together by need. The plants give energy. The herbivores channel it. The carnivores recycle it. Even the fungi, the insects, the decomposers, they join in, eating the dead, nourishing the roots again. It's not a line, it's a circle, a friendship where no one is truly alone. Even in death, there is contribution, like a village, where every role, quiet or loud, matters. Nature's philosophy, we need each other. Pause here again. Think of your own life, of the people who nourish you, not with food, perhaps, but with kindness, with laughter, with presence. The Triassic forest whispers, you are part of something. You may be the quiet tree, the thoughtful grazer, the protector, or even the challenger. But you are not useless. Your way of being shapes the space around you, even your rest, even your absence, even your stillness. The return of warmth, a system in motion. As the Triassic climate calms slightly, rain becomes more rhythmic, forests stretch wider, rivers find their paths again. With stability comes abundance. The herbivores begin to travel in larger groups, safer, more social. The carnivores grow smarter, learning patience, strategy. Even the plants evolve. Some grow taller to escape reach, some thicker to resist nibbling teeth. And slowly the land becomes woven, like a tapestry, with every thread holding tension, every strand supporting another. There is no single king here, only harmony, and when it breaks, as it sometimes does, the system shifts to restore itself. Because the earth does not punish, it simply rebalances. Soft lessons from hard places. From this delicate web of leaf and claw, a few soft lessons drift out for us. Growth comes from giving. Strength can be gentle. Even those who eat must respect the eaten. Balance is not stillness, it's movement in sync. You don't need to dominate to matter. You don't need to be the biggest, the fastest, the loudest. Sometimes your role is to nourish others, just by existing, to offer shade, to listen quietly, to hold space. And in doing so, you become irreplaceable. As night falls in the Triassic, now the sun begins to dim. The long shadows of conifer trees stretch across the earth like lullabies. In the distance, a Plateosaurus lowers its head, chewing slowly, eyes half closed. A Coelophysis nearby watches, but does not strike. Tonight is not a night for hunting. Tonight, the forest exhales. The ecosystem rests. And beneath the stars, somewhere between root and tooth, a truth settles quietly. Life is not a ladder, it's a web, and we are all tied together in threads of light and breath. So rest now, dear friend. Let the plants cradle you. Let the footsteps comfort you. You are not alone in this forest of time. Like the leaf and the hoof, the root and the paw, your presence shapes the world in ways you may never see, and that is more than enough. To a strange kind of harmony. Not all harmony comes from things that look alike. Some comes from contrast, from unlikely pairings, from partnerships that seem fragile, even absurd, but quietly endure. Tonight, dear listener, we return to the forests and rivers of the Triassic, not to witness great beasts or towering ferns, but to watch the quiet dancers, the tiny, the in-between, the interdependent. Let us drift among the roots and shadows, and listen to the odd little friendships that made survival possible. The pollinators without flowers. In the Triassic world, there were no flowers yet, no petals to attract bees, no sweet nectar glistening under morning sun. But even without flowers, the world was alive with movement, with insects humming in low arcs, with beetles crawling from bark to leaf. And the plants, though simple, still needed help. They needed partners. And so, a silent deal was made between early seed plants like cycads and ginkgos and the insects of the undergrowth. The plants offered sap, dustings of nutritious pollen, shelter in their cones. In return, the insects carried those precious grains, from plant to plant, branch to branch, ensuring new life could begin. This was pollination before petals, a secret handshake in the forest, millions of years before the first rose would bloom. Sometimes progress starts not with invention, but with quiet cooperation. Ants and the architects of soil. Beneath the towering trees, another world stirred, a world of tunnels, chambers, and silent architecture. Here, early ants and burrowing beetles played their roles, breaking down fallen leaves, moving tiny pieces of the forest. One grain at a time. These creatures weren't flashy. They didn't roar or run, but they were essential. By decomposing plant matter, they returned nutrients to the soil. By burrowing, they loosened earth, allowing roots to breathe. In their endless, patient labor, they became the forest's quiet engineers. It is easy to overlook the small, but the earth remembers. The forest knows. Riders and cleaners, mutualism in motion. High above, perched on the armored backs of an Dinosaur, a tiny insect rests, not to feast, but to help. This insect is a cleaner, nibbling away ticks, mites, and parasites from the skin of its giant host. The Dinosaur tolerates it, even shifts its weight to help. It is a strange kind of friendship, a scaly tank, and a bug, but they both benefit. In modern times, we still see echoes of this. Birds on rhinos, fish cleaning sharks, partners formed not from affection, but from balance. Sometimes, connection isn't sentimental. Sometimes it's strategic and still sacred. Fins beside shells, harmony in the shallows. Let's leave the forest now. Let's wade into the shallow seas that cradled early marine life. Here, among waving seaweed and sun-speckled sand, we find Dinosaurs, long-necked marine reptiles, gliding between coral skeletons. And with them swim tiny armored fish, slipping between their limbs. These are no chases. These are not predator and prey. These fish stay close, feeding on leftovers, keeping parasites at bay. In return, they receive protection, living in the shadow of giants. They are the roommates of the reef, unlikely companions, coexisting like notes in a soft chord. The crocodile cousins who didn't conquer. Among all the early reptiles, one group might have looked destined to dominate. Phytosaurs, crocodile-like archosaurs with long jaws and sneaky ambush tactics. They hunted from riverbanks, eyes just above the water. They had the tools, speed, teeth, stealth, and yet, they never became rulers of the land. Why? Because they stayed in their niche. They didn't overreach. They didn't push out of their domain. They coexisted with other creatures, some of whom would later rise higher than they ever did. Phytosaurs remind us, you don't have to be the biggest to belong. You don't have to win everything to thrive. Sometimes staying in your river is enough. Evolution's quiet conversations. Evolution is often painted as a battle. The strongest wins, the weakest falls. But in truth, it is filled with conversations. Slow ones across generations. Plant produces a new scent. An insect evolves to detect it. Predator grows sharper teeth. Prey stronger armor. Each change is met with another. Not war, but response. Like a call and answer, like a dance. Even today, your body holds echoes of these ancient dialogues. In your immune system, your instincts, your senses. We are not born from dominance. We are born from relationship. The early feathers that weren't for flight. In the shadows of ferns, a creature stirs with something odd along its skin. Not scales, not fur, but filaments, proto-feathers. Cannot fly, not yet, but these strange threads help with insulation, keeping the little hunter warm through chilly nights. Later, they might be used for display, for attracting mates, for looking big in the face of danger. Later still, they will become wings. But for now, they are just whispers of possibility. A mutation not punished, but embraced. Sometimes what seems useless is simply early. The beauty of non-perfection. Across the land, the forest breathes not in symmetry, but in beautiful irregularity. Not all trees are tall. Not all hunters are fierce. Not all friendships are obvious. But they form a system, messy, vibrant, whole. Even the predators have parasites. Even the prey have defenses. Even the smallest beetle shifts the forest floor. It is a reminder, perfection is not required. Participation is. You don't have to be flawless. You don't have to have everything figured out. Just take your place in the harmony. Lessons from strange friendships. Tonight, under Triassic skies, let's gather what these odd friendships whisper. You can belong even if you're different. Helping others helps the system. Being small does not mean being unimportant. Your existence affects more than you know. And perhaps most importantly, there is room for the unexpected, for the weird, the awkward, the this shouldn't work but somehow does. Because sometimes that's where the magic hides. As you drift into sleep, as you rest now, let these ancient harmonies hum in your heart. Picture the insect on the Dinosaur's back, the beetle loosening soil, the Nothosaur gliding beside its tiny fish friend, and feel yourself not as separate, not as a problem to solve, but as a piece of something vast and strange and beautiful. You are not perfect. You are not alone. You are part of a strange kind of harmony, and that is more than enough. 3. Symphony of the soil and sky. In the cool hush between dusk and night, as the red sun slips behind Triassic hills, The world does not fall silent. It just changes key. What had been a chorus of chirps and rustles in sunlight now becomes something deeper, a soft, almost imperceptible hum. Beneath the leaves, within the soil, and far above, where clouds drift like half-remembered dreams. This is not the time for thunderous roars or dazzling displays. This is the hour for the quiet ones, the watchers, the whisperers, the lovers without language. Tonight we listen to their song, silent courtships and the language of color. Long before birds would sing to woo, before whales crooned in ocean halls, the creatures of the Triassic flirted in silence. There were no love ballads echoing through the canyons, but there were glimmers, a shimmer on a scale, a flicker of color across a frill, a faint scent carried by the breeze. Early reptiles, some no larger than your hand, may have displayed intricate patterns on their skin that shifted with emotion, not to shout but to signal. It was a language without words, where every ripple of hue meant something. I am here. I am safe. I see you. Some insects crafted pheromonal poems, scents that danced invisibly through the air, drawing mates from meters away. No sound, no flash, just scent and certainty. And this too was music, a kind you feel in your chest, but never hear. The creatures who laughed at light. As the days grew hotter under Pangaea's wide, unbroken sun, some creatures made a different choice. They did not fight the heat. They fled it. These were the first nocturnal pioneers, the ancestors of owls, bats, and cats, who learned to live by moonlight. Under stars, they hunted quietly. Their eyes widened, attuned to shadows. Their ears learned every rustle of leaf and twitch of grass. They were not the strongest, not the fastest, but they were the wisest in their way. They knew that softness is also survival, that hiding is not weakness, it is strategy. And like many gentle souls in our own world, they found beauty in stillness, safety in solitude, and joy in being unseen. The plants that felt the wind, the forest too played its part. In this subtle symphony, even without flowers, Triassic plants were expressive. Ferns unfurled in slow spirals, cone-bearing trees whispered in resin-sweetened breezes. Some sent chemical signals underground. When a leaf was bitten, a warning passed from root to root, tree to tree, in a network of knowing. We now call this the Wood Wide Web. Back then, it was intuition, written in sugar and scent. They didn't need words or eyes or brains. They had each other. They had connection, a footprint shared. On a riverbank hardened by morning sun, two footprints appear, one small, one large, perhaps a tiny mammal-like creature. Crossed paths with a nothosaur returning to sea. Perhaps they never saw each other. Perhaps they paused. But those footprints remain, pressed together in stone, for 240 million years. Not because they roared or conquered, but because they existed in the same place, at the same time. Sometimes harmony is not a duet. Sometimes it's just two lives, briefly overlapping, the breath between earth and sky. Every leaf that fell became part of the soil. Every breath exhaled by a fern fed something unseen. The atmosphere and the earth were in constant, delicate exchange, a push and pull of oxygen and carbon, breath and dust, sky and root. Early microbes in the soil helped lock away gases that could kill. Trees released vapors that cooled the air above them. Even the animals played their part. eating, digesting, excreting, cycling nutrients with each bite. It was not just a food chain. It was a rhythm, a symphony. You are part of it too, even now, with every breath, with every step. For the ones who live in shadows, some of us, dear listener, do not shine brightly. We do not take center stage. We live in corners, on the edges, beneath the noise. We are the ones who observe, who feel deeply, who bloom only when no one is looking. And that's okay. The Triassic night was filled with creatures like us. Moths with soft wings, insects that only dared sing when the air cooled, reptiles who crept silently beneath starlight. They remind us, to be quiet is not to be weak. To be unseen is not to be unloved. Harmony isn't always obvious. In the fossil beds of what is now South Africa, scientists discovered a curious find, an early burrow. Inside, the remains of a small reptile lay curled beside what appeared to be a completely different species. Two creatures sharing the same shelter. Why? We may never know for sure, but perhaps they were companions, warming each other in cold nights, protecting one another in storms. Or maybe it was just coincidence. But if even the possibility of friendship exists in stone, isn't that a kind of hope? That we too can find warmth in unexpected places. Every little thing matters. There is no part of this earth too small to sing. The dew on a cycad leaf, the rhythm of an insect's wings, the warmth stored in a burrowed den. These are the instruments of the forest symphony. And so are you. Not because you shout, not because you conquer, but because you are here, because you make ripples just by being. As you close your eyes tonight, let the music of the Triassic night wrap around you like a soft cocoon. Feel the hush of the fern canopy, the hush of breathing soil, the hush of creatures who live and love in silence. You do not need to prove anything tonight. You do not need to shine. It is enough to rest, to be, to breathe. Let the wind carry your worries away. Let the darkness become your friend. You are not alone in the night. You are one of many, in the symphony of the soil and sky, and in your quiet heart, you are already singing. Part 6. Quietly open the age of dinosaurs. 1. First footsteps of dominion. In the hush of a world still waking from catastrophe, before the trumpet of tyrants or the thunder of herds, there was only the sound of footsteps, soft, deliberate, resilient, not the mighty stomps you might imagine. Not yet. These were the cautious steps of creatures newly formed, testing the ground, beneath a sky freshly cleared. The great extinction had ended, but the earth was not healed overnight. It was a slow return, like sap rising after winter, like a breath held too long finally being released. And in this quiet world, a dynasty began to bloom. The stage is set. It was not a grand entrance. The Triassic was still wild with contrast. Parched deserts and seasonal monsoons, fresh jungles tangled with old stone. Here, the supercontinent Pangaea still reigned. A single vast landmass stretched from pole to pole, baking beneath the relentless sun. In some regions, forests had returned, cone-bearing trees with roots deep in memory. In others, sand ruled all. Dry winds carried the ghosts of eras past. The world, in many ways, was still trying to decide what it wanted to become. And into this uncertainty, the first true dinosaurs emerged. They did not come as conquerors. Not yet. They were few. They were small. They were experiments. But they were different. and sometimes different is enough. Herosaurus and the experimental royals. Among these early pioneers was Herosaurus, a predator no bigger than a modern-day motorcycle, but swift, agile, and clever. With sharp teeth and long legs, Herosaurus danced through the underbrush, hunting smaller reptiles and insects, weaving through ferns like a shadow with claws. In the same arenas roamed Coelophysis, slender and bird-like, with a chest narrow as a flute, and eyes alert as moonlight. They were not the biggest, nor the strongest, but they had a gift: balance. Long tails for counterweight, light bones for speed, a gait that was more dancer than brawler. These weren't the giants of the Jurassic yet to come. They were the prototypes, the sketches before the masterpiece. But oh, what potential they carried in their bones. The fall of the ancient titans. Before these nimble dinosaurs took their stage, there were others who ruled. The Rawasuchians, large, fearsome predators, with armor along their backs, and jaws that split bone. The Prestosuchids, towering like reptilian tanks, stalking the riverbanks with crushing power. They had thrived in the post-extinction chaos, built for brute force and domination, but Earth, as always, favored the adaptable. The world was shifting again, climates warming, ecosystems rebuilding, and what once was a strength began to become a burden. Heavily built bodies meant slower recovery. Greater size meant greater hunger. Their time, like the fading stars of morning, was coming to an end, and in their shadow, the dinosaurs walked on. Not a battle, but a drift. It wasn't a war. Not really. Dinosaurs didn't rise by killing off their rivals. They rose by being better suited to what Earth was becoming. They reproduced faster. They matured earlier. They were lighter, nimbler, more versatile. They didn't charge into dominance. They drifted into it, like seeds on wind, like starlight spreading across a dark sky. One generation at a time, one step forward, then another. No crown was passed, no throne was taken, but the era of dinosaurs had begun. The quiet traits that win. What made them rise? It wasn't just claws or teeth. It was efficiency. It was timing. It was the kind of intelligence that doesn't boast, but adapts. Coelophysis, for example, may have hunted in packs, using coordination, not just power. They were curious, observant, capable of adjusting to the unpredictable world around them. Even their eggs were clever, hard-shelled and laid in safe nests, often in places warm and hidden. Small things, quiet things, but when the world is changing fast, it's the quiet ones who endure. Lessons from a shifting world. Dear listener, as you drift closer to sleep, know this: the ones who shaped history were not always the loudest. They were not always the fiercest. Sometimes they were the ones who saw ahead, who learned, who listened to the earth, and whispered back, "You too live in a time of change." And like Herosaurus or Coelophysis, you may feel small, outnumbered, uncertain, but your steps matter. Every time you adapt, every time you rest and rise again, you are doing what they did. And look how far they came. A new dawn on the horizon. By the end of the late Triassic, the signs were clear. The old rulers had dwindled. The new ones, dinosaurs, were spreading. From forests to floodplains, from canyons to coasts, they still had challengers. The world still had surprises. But the seed had been planted. The whisper had become a voice. And in time, that voice would become a roar. But not tonight. Tonight we rest with the memory of first footsteps, the steps that reshaped the earth, not with force, but with persistence. 2. The Song of the Sea Giants. Close your eyes now and listen. Beyond the mountains, beyond the forests and shifting deserts, beneath the quiet stars of the Triassic night, the sea begins to sing. It is not a melody made of human voices. It has no words, but it flows low and resonant through the waves, like the heartbeat of Earth itself. For long ages, the oceans had been silent. After the Great Dying, when the Permian's firestorms and poison skies had swept life from the waters, the seas were still, empty, breathless. But time, always patient, always faithful, has a way of healing even the deepest wounds. And now, a new generation begins to stir. Return of the deep. It started quietly. Tiny plankton, barely visible, began to shimmer once more beneath the surface. They caught sunlight in their cells, little stars reborn in the sea. They fed the krill fed the fish, and slowly, delicately, a web of life spun itself again through the water. Then came the hunters, not the giants, not yet, but small, sleek predators with teeth like needles, and tails built for slithering through the tides. These were the Dinosaurs, half lizard, half swimmer. They were Earth's first serious attempt at reclaiming the oceans. After catastrophe, the Dinosaurs, first explorers of the sea. The Dinosaurs were strange things, not quite like anything we know today. With long necks, webbed feet, and paddle-like tails, they could move on land, but preferred the freedom of water. They swam with grace, like otters in moonlight, chasing fish through coral mazes, weaving between kelp forests that waved like sleepy dancers. Some were small, nimble, almost playful. Others grew larger, sleeker, silent hunters in twilight tides. And they were only the beginning, because from their lineage, from these cautious swimmers, would rise something grander. The birth of the sea giants. Plesiosaurs emerge. If you could drift through the ocean shallows of the late Triassic, you might feel it first, a ripple in the current, a shadow passing overhead, and then you would see her, a plesiosaur, long-necked, barrel-bodied, for mighty flippers rhythmically pushing her through the water, like a living submarine forged of silk and scale. She is no fish. She is not even fully a reptile in the traditional sense. She is something new, a being made for the sea, for silence, for gliding through eternity. Her head is small but alert. Her eyes are wide, seeing in every direction. She does not chase. She waits. She watches. And then, with a twist and a surge, she strikes, and dinner disappears into the dark. This is her kingdom now. Not the forests, not the skies, but the cathedral of blue that stretches from pole to pole. And she will rule it for millions of years. The ocean as a dream. Can you hear it now? That song? It hums through every current, every wave that rolls across a reef. It rises with the whales of the future, but began with these reptiles, these gentle monsters who floated before time learned to speak. In the Triassic, there were no whales, no dolphins, no penguins, but the idea of them was forming, a whisper in evolution's sleep. The plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs were the prototype lullabies, the early verses of a poem that Earth would keep writing. In fins, in flukes, in fluid motion. Even now, when you sit by the ocean and listen to the rhythm of the tide, You are hearing something that began here. With them, the shells that hold memory. Beneath these sea giants swam the tiny architects, the shelled wonders. Ammonites with their spiraled homes drifted and danced through the ancient waters, like spinning coins tossed into a wishing well. They came in every size, every swirl. Some glowed with bioluminescent sparkles. Some flashed bold stripes or patterns to confuse would-be predators. They were prey, yes, but they were also artists, each shell a record, a symphony frozen in time. Their fossils today still echo with the shape of the sea, a memory you can hold in your hand, a world in layers. The surface shimmered with light. Below, shadows crisscrossed in blues and greens, and in the very deepest places, where the sun had never touched, life pulsed anyway. Strange worms, blind fish, and glowing creatures waited in silence. Even here, Earth whispered, "You are not forgotten. You belong." The Triassic Sea was not one sea, but many, a world in layers, like the folds of a dream, and every layer had its singers, its dancers, its guardians. The Nothosaurs' legacy. The Nothosaurs would not last forever. In time, they gave way to more specialized swimmers, the plesiosaurs, the ichthyosaurs, and eventually the mosasaurs of the Cretaceous. But they matter because they were the first to say, "Let's try again. Let's swim even if it's hard. Let's rebuild what was lost." Their legacy is not in size or power, but in courage. And that is something worth remembering, what the ocean teaches. So as you rest tonight, imagine the sea as it once was, wide, endless, unknown, a place of silence, where silence became song. The sea does not shout, it does not rush, it waits, it flows, it heals, and you can too. Let the waves cradle your worries. Let the salt wash away the strain of your day. Let the memory of ancient swimmers remind you that life returns even after its darkest hour. You are like them, part of a long journey, part of a quiet song, and in your stillness, you are swimming forward. 3. And the mammals began to stir. Shoo, listen closer. Not to the thunder of giants or the crash of ancient waves, but to something smaller, something softer, a breath behind the breeze, a whisper beneath the roots. For while the world above marveled at rising reptiles, at the dawn of dinosaurs and the glory of the sea, something quiet was happening in the shadows. Not a revolution, not yet, but the faintest twitch in the undergrowth, a stirring, a heartbeat, a warm-blooded sigh, in the cool stillness of night. This is the chapter of the cynodonts, not kings, not conquerors, but keepers of the long dream, the ancestors of every warm smile, every soft ear, every mammal, including you. In the quiet places they survived. The Triassic Earth was not an easy place to be small. The land was ruled by sharp teeth and heavy footsteps. The skies echoed with reptilian cries, and the seas were alive with massive jaws and long-necked hunters. To be a cynodont, a small, warm-blooded, whiskered creature, was to live in the quiet spaces in between, beneath logs, inside burrows, under cover of dusk. And yet, they did live. They thrived in their own way, feeding on insects, caring for their young, evolving in silence. They didn't shout their survival to the skies. They whispered it into the soil, the shape of things to come. What is a cynodont? Imagine a creature like a lizard, but not quite. Imagine it with fur beginning to sprout, with sharp teeth specialized for slicing and chewing, and a jaw that no longer opened with the stiff hinge of a reptile, but with the flexibility of a mammal. Imagine a creature with complex inner ears, already beginning to tune into subtler sounds, like the scamper of prey or the cry of its own young. Imagine, too, something rarer still in ancient times: parenting. Cynodonts didn't just lay eggs and leave. Some may have nurtured their babies, kept them warm in shared dens, fed them with milk or something very like it. Tiny, yes, but compassion had begun. And compassion, in the history of life, is always revolutionary. Warm-blooded dreamers. While the great archosaurs basked in the sun to stay warm, cynodonts may have carried a secret fire inside, metabolisms that burned steadily, keeping them active in the cool of twilight, the chill of early dawn. This fire was not just warmth, it was possibility. It let them explore hours when others slept. It let them move faster, live smarter, stay hidden. And like any good dreamer, they knew that life was not just about survival, but about continuing, evolving, becoming. They didn't know where their path would lead, but they walked it anyway, soft-footed, steady-hearted, carrying futures in their cells. The power of being overlooked. Sometimes the ones who change the world are not those at the center of attention. Sometimes it is the quiet ones, the unnoticed, the ones working patiently in the background, planting seeds no one will see bloom for 100 million years. The cynodonts were those kinds of beings. They weren't flashy, they didn't rule the earth, but they outlived many who did, because they were adaptable, resilient, inventive. They bent with the world's wind instead of breaking, and in doing so, they carried the secret of mammals forward, step by tiny step, small shifts, giant futures. For milk, playfulness, social bonds, parental care, all of these began not with lions or humans, but with tiny creatures hiding from the sun, with the cynodonts shaping the mammalian blueprint. Their bones changed, their teeth specialized, their spines became more flexible. These were not just random shifts. They were evolution's quiet symphony, moving toward something profound. Every blink of an eye, every sniff of a nose, every twitch of a tail was part of a transformation that would one day give rise to wolves and whales, to elephants and apes, to you, a lullaby for the unseen. Tonight, as you lie in your own den, your bed, you may feel small, overlooked, just one quiet life in a noisy world, but that's what they felt too. The cynodonts. And look what they became. You don't need to shout to be significant. You don't need to shine every second. You just need to continue, to breathe, to grow, to rest when you must, and to know that even your smallest actions, your quiet persistence, can carry futures inside them, like the first warm-blooded heart, beating in the cool of the Triassic night. The forests remember. Sometimes they emerged at dusk, to walk through mossy underbrush, sniffing for food, listening for danger, and sometimes they simply curled in their burrows, holding their young close, letting the planet spin above them. The forests, now dotted with conifers and cycads, offered shelter. The air, humid with new life, carried the scent of pine, resin, and wet earth. Even the trees, whose lifetimes spanned centuries, seemed to whisper, "Go on, keep going, you matter." Footprints in the dust. Fossil records show us their traces. Tiny footprints, crossing streams, ducking into hollow logs, chasing insects through fallen leaves. We find their jaws, their ear bones, and sometimes even their nests. But more than bones, they left us a story, the story of the underdog, of life that refuses to quit, of a lineage that waited millions of years to rise when the time was right. They didn't rush, they prepared, just like the dreams you hold now, even if no one sees them, even if they're still growing in the dark, the fire that stays lit. So sleep now, dear listener. Know that in the grand epic of Earth, you are part of a long line of dreamers and survivors. The cynodonts did not roar. They whispered. They endured. They changed the world, not with force, but with faith. The same quiet fire burns in you. Let it warm you. Let it guide you. And may you wake tomorrow, a little stronger, a little kinder, and full of the quiet power that changes everything. A look back from extinction to rebirth, from fire to flower, from ash to dream. You have walked with the earth through sorrow, silence, and song. Now, my dear traveler of time, let us rest for a while. You've wandered far, across fiery plains and through reborn seas, among small footsteps and giant shadows. You've listened to the first dreams of forests, watched ancient winds carve new continents, and stood beside creatures who rose, stumbled, and dared to try again. This is a quiet moment now, a hush before a new chapter, a gentle exhale before tomorrow's dawn. So come, curl closer to this story one more time. Let us look back not with fear, but with tenderness. For this too is the rhythm of life, to remember, to heal, to grow. It began with fire. Do you remember how it started? Not with life blooming, but with life falling. The Permian ended in firestorms, choking skies, and oceans that forgot how to breathe. It was the great dying. The earth, as if too burdened with breath, fell silent. But even in that silence, life whispered back, not in shouts, but in trembles, in the small stirring of spores, in the stubborn beat of tiny hearts hiding in the dark. Hope did not vanish. It hid. It waited. It breathed beneath the ashes. First, the roots returned. The land healed first in fragments. The forests that once towered like cathedrals were gone. But here and there, seeds found soil again. Little ferns crept across cracked rock. Conifers reached for light. Ginkgos, strange and old-souled, stretched their fingers upward. There were no trumpets to announce them, but they came. Life, in its quiet courage, began to rebuild the green. And with plants came shelter, came shade, came the promise of food, of homes, of ecosystems once more. Like memories returning to a place long forgotten, the land began to remember how to live again. The sea sang softly. In the oceans, the hush was deeper. Once blue and bright, they had turned murky and still. But time is a gentle sculptor, and the sea, she does not forget her song. Phytoplankton returned, floating like stars in a sunlit galaxy. Tiny fish nibbled at them, and larger fish chased the small. Soon, slender predators slithered through kelp and coral. The Dinosaurs, first to dare reclaim the sea. Then came the Plesiosaurs, gliding like underwater dreams, each movement a dance older than language. From silence to symphony, the oceans bloomed again, not loudly, but beautifully, and on land the dreamers woke. On land, the age of experiments had begun. Reptiles multiplied, some strange, some swift, some slow. Some grew sails on their backs. Some towered on legs that stood beneath them for the first time. Archosaurs divided paths. Some would become crocodiles, some dinosaurs, and some long after would rise as birds. But not all creatures rushed into greatness. In the shadows, cynodonts, soft-furred, warm-bodied, quiet, built nests, licked their young, and carried in their genes the blueprints of future mammals. They didn't roar, they didn't dominate, but they persisted because they loved, because they adapted, because they dreamed. Eggs cracked open possibilities. Everywhere life tried again. From hardened eggs came babies with new shapes, stronger jaws, more flexible limbs, better lungs for the warming world. Eggs weren't just shells. They were vaults of possibility. Wrapped in calcium, they hid future feathers, scales, teeth, and paws. The reptiles were diversifying like wild artists. Some would paint futures in the sky. Some would dance through meadows millions of years away. Some would not make it at all. But the courage to try, to split the shell, to step into the unknown, was everywhere. Some rose by waiting. The Triassic world did not belong to one kind of creature. Some rose because they were fast, some because they were fierce, but some because they waited. They burrowed into cool earth when heat soared. They hid beneath leaves when predators passed. They grew quickly, reproduced early, and left behind seeds of themselves. Before the next drought, the next fire, the next flood. They did not live long, but they lived well, in rhythm with the world's heartbeat. Adaptation, not strength, is the measure of survival. And this wisdom bloomed in 1,000 quiet lives. The mammals whispered a future. Near the end of the Triassic, as dinosaurs began to rise in number and size, something else was happening. In tiny, mossy dens, in nocturnal forests lit only by starlight, the ancestors of mammals twitched in their sleep. Their bodies grew warmer, their senses sharper, their brains just a little bigger. They weren't destined to rule, not yet, but their time would come, because their strength was not in muscle or mass, but in endurance, empathy, and the fire they carried within. Like the listener curled now beneath soft blankets, they did not need the world to see them, to know they were becoming something beautiful. The world itself shifted, and underneath all this evolution, the earth moved. Pangaea, the great supercontinent, cracked. Rain returned to some places. Others dried into red deserts. Valleys opened. Islands formed. Oceans widened. It was a landscape in flux, and life responded with fluid grace. Where land changed, creatures followed. Where skies warmed or chilled, they adapted. It wasn't easy, but nothing worth becoming ever is. What this all means for you. Now take a slow breath. Let the weight of this long journey settle gently on your shoulders. This story has never been just about dinosaurs or reptiles or plants. It has always been about transformation, about becoming, about the power of the small, the quiet, the unseen. You've walked through fire, just like the earth. You've had seasons of silence, just like the ocean. You've planted seeds no one saw, nurtured hopes in the dark, and you too are evolving in ways the world might not yet understand. But like the cynodonts, the conifers, the coral reefs, you are not broken. You are becoming, and even your resting is part of that sacred process. The hug at the end of the story. So let this be the gentle hug. At the end of a long, marvelous tale, let it say, "You made it. You grew. You were never alone in this. And as your eyes begin to close, remember, there's a Jurassic sunrise ahead, a world of wonders still waiting to bloom. But for now, sleep, wrapped in the arms of the Triassic, where every breath is a lullaby from a world learning to dream again. But wait, dear listener, before we drift away completely, there is still a heartbeat I'd like you to hear, faint but steady, echoing in the cracks of ancient rock and in the cradle of your own quiet strength. For you see, the Triassic world was not perfect. It was new, raw, wounded and unsure. It was a world still trembling from loss, still learning to trust the light again. But despite the chaos, despite the heat, the droughts, the hunger, it carried hope like a tiny seed tucked in the corner of a forgotten garden. This is something we often forget. Hope does not need certainty. It only needs time, a little shelter, and someone who believes it's worth trying again. Some creatures didn't grow big, didn't shine, didn't conquer. They simply persisted. They curled in cool shadows. They waited for rain. They nursed their young gently, while meteors of change flew over them. And isn't that how real change happens? Quietly, in bedrooms and basements and broken hearts. In early mornings when no one is watching. In whispered promises to keep going, even if no one claps. The Triassic wasn't about heroes. It was about beginnings. Messy, uncertain, miraculous beginnings. So tonight, as you lie here, perhaps not knowing what's next, perhaps unsure of your own path or purpose, remember this: the world does not demand that you be strong all the time. It only asks that you keep breathing, that you keep becoming, that you stay open, like the first fern uncurling in ash. Because the most beautiful things often begin, not with thunder, but with a sigh. And just as those ancient creatures didn't know, they would one day become birds or lions or you don't yet know what your story will bloom into, but it's growing, even now, even in your sleep. So let go of today. Let it fall from your shoulders like ancient dust. Let your mind drift, like a leaf caught in a Triassic breeze, slow, spiraling, safe. Let this world, reborn, uncertain, luminous, hold you, rock you, and remind you you are part of something vast, something ancient, something eternal, and still something brand new, to a young world, yet full of hope. Close your eyes now. Let the stardust of time gently settle over your mind. The world is still very young. It breathes but hesitantly. It walks but with wobbly feet. It sings but softly, like a child still learning the shape of its voice. And that is where we begin tonight, in a world not yet perfected, but filled with quiet hope. The earth, though reborn, was fragile. Mountains still smoked with the memory of past eruptions. The sky had not fully cleared. The climate teetered between scorching and frozen, between drought and flood, as if unsure how to settle. The continents, still fused into the supercontinent Pangaea, were stiff with heat. Hot winds blew across vast deserts. Rain only fell in whispers. Forests clung to what corners they could. But somehow, in this unstable world, life didn't just survive. It began to trust again. Trust, you see, is the foundation of every rebirth. The forests grew slowly, not the towering lycopod jungles of the Carboniferous, nor the deep lushness of future rainforests, but something simpler, something more like a promise than a song. Conifers sent their needles skyward. Ferns unfurled like green lace. Cycads, ancient as forgotten dreams, stood like statues in the heat. They didn't know what they would become, but they knew how to stay. And that is the first kind of courage. Not the loud kind, but the kind that roots. The animals, too, were learning. Small herbivores ventured through the brush, testing the taste of new leaves, learning where to drink, where to hide, how to love in an uncertain world. Predators stalked quietly, still refining their art. They weren't the apex giants yet, but their instincts were sharpening. There were mistakes. There were missteps. Entire lineages would rise and fall before they found what worked. But every failure planted a seed. Hope is not about having everything perfect. It's about planting anyway, loving anyway, trying anyway. Some creatures became nocturnal, learning to live by starlight. Their eyes grew large. Their ears listened deeper. They found peace in the shadows. Others dug tunnels into the earth, not to hide but to build, to rest, to raise young, to wait. The wise know, rest is not a weakness. Stillness is not a flaw. Sometimes to pause is to prepare. In the corners of the forests, something miraculous stirred. The cynodonts, small, unassuming, warm-blooded creatures, began to nurture something deeper, emotion. They didn't just breed and run. They stayed. They cared. They licked their babies clean. They whispered in sense. They built little worlds of connection. It was the beginning of empathy, the seed of what would become mammals, of what would one day become us. But they had no idea. They weren't aiming for greatness. They were simply loving what was in front of them. And in doing so, they shaped the future. This world was still forming its ideas. There were no clear winners, no rulers, just possibilities. Every creature, every plant, every fungus and coral reef was part of a great brainstorm. Nature wasn't finished. She was sketching, again and again until something clicked. The dinosaurs were rising, yes, but they were still awkward, still evolving. The oceans were thriving, but not yet symphonic. This was not the grand performance. This was the rehearsal, and that's where the magic lived. Because beginnings are sacred, not because they are flawless, but because they are brave. And so are you. Maybe your life doesn't feel polished. Maybe your path is winding, uncertain, still full of trial and error. But just like this young earth, you are creating foundations, quietly, patiently, for something extraordinary. Be kind to yourself in this season of becoming. Let your failures be seeds. Let your stumbles become stories. Let your slow days teach you stillness. For the Triassic did not rush, and neither must you. Evolution doesn't bloom overnight. It hums through centuries. It stumbles. It rewinds. It rests. Then one day something wondrous breaks free. A feather, a tooth, a mind, a heart, and everything changes. So tonight, while the world outside spins, let the earth of long ago cradle your spirit. Let the young forests remind you that growing takes time. Let the gentle mammals remind you that love is revolutionary. Let the quiet oceans remind you that silence holds songs yet unsung. You are part of this lineage. You are part of this unfolding. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are simply not finished yet. Breathe now. Dream now. Grow softly. The Triassic may be fading, but its legacy is only just beginning. And so are you. And you, dear friend of history, rest now. Shoo, let everything go quiet now. Let the thrum of the Triassic hush. Let the winds soften. Let the stars begin their slow, silver dance across the ancient sky. You, dear listener, dear traveler of deep time, have come so far. Close your eyes. Place your hands softly on your chest. Feel it? That heartbeat? It has walked through fire and flood, through silence and song, through extinction and rebirth. And tonight, it rests, wrapped in the lullaby of history itself. Once, this earth was aflame with endings. You saw it, the great dying, a world gasping, grieving, falling silent. But you stayed, you listened, you breathed with it, you walked the soft paths of recovery. You followed tiny lizards through ferny forests. You watched coral reefs bloom like underwater cathedrals. You laughed with the early dinosaurs as they stumbled into greatness. And you rested in the shadows with the small ones, those who did not roar or run, but simply lived, quietly, kindly. The earth remembers you for that. She thanks you, because not every explorer listens this deeply. Not everyone has the heart to wander through forgotten time, seeking not glory, but understanding. But you did, and now the Triassic sleeps. Her skies are dimming. Her creatures, both bold and bashful, are curling into nests and dens. The forests are humming lullabies in the dark. The oceans are whispering goodnight in waves. It is not the end, only a gentle turning of the page, because ahead lies something grand, something thunderous, something filled with feathers and fangs and ferns taller than dreams. Yes, the Jurassic waits, but not tonight. Tonight we rest, and before that rest, we remember. Let us remember the quiet miracles of this time. Let us remember that healing began not with kings and empires, but with moss, with fungi, with tiny hearts refusing to give up. Let us remember that the future mammals didn't roar their way into history. They curled up in the dark, nuzzled their young, and waited for the world to soften. Let us remember that greatness does not always wear a crown. Sometimes it wears patience. Let us remember, too, that even the most chaotic landscapes still found balance when plants, prey, and predator learn to dance again. In the rhythm of ecosystems, life doesn't demand perfection, only participation. And you've been part of it all. Can you feel the drowsy breeze now? It smells of pine resin, warm earth, and salt. It carries the hush of a world holding its breath. Before the next great symphony, everything sleeps. The ichthyosaurs glide deeper into their watery dreams. The ginkgos fold their leaves like hands in prayer. The stars blink slowly over mountains that have yet to rise. You too are allowed to rest now. You too are allowed to set down your worries, like fossils settling into stone. You too are held by time, by memory, by something older than sorrow. And in that resting, something grows. Maybe it's a new breath, maybe a dream, maybe a feeling you thought had long gone extinct, returning, blinking, like the first creature to step out of the sea. You don't need to know what it is, only that it's real, only that it is yours. And if the world feels uncertain, if your own life sometimes feels like a Triassic desert, dry, shifting, hard to survive, remember this: even the desert was once ocean. Even silence becomes song. Even endings bloom again. The past is not just history, it's evidence of survival. And you, dear heart, you are part of that evidence. Let the night wrap you now like a fossil in warm sand. Imagine lying on the back of a slow, ancient creature, his heartbeat steady, his breath warm like summer wind. Imagine stars so close you can taste their light. Imagine sleeping under ferns that sway like lullabies. You are safe here. Time is not your enemy. It is your blanket. And tomorrow we will rise again, in a different age, with new creatures, new colors, new dreams. But for now, just now, let go. Let the last sounds of the Triassic become whispers in your mind. Let the last creatures slip into shadow. Let the last thoughts of the day melt into sleep. You've walked with the earth through pain and persistence. You've seen her fall. You've seen her begin again. You've seen her grow something beautiful from ashes. That story is your story too. So rest, my friend, not because it's over, but because you've earned it. And while you sleep, the Jurassic will begin, quietly, softly, like a new heartbeat, underneath the stars. Good night, dear traveler of deep time. Sleep deeply, with trilobite dreams and dinosaur lullabies. You are not alone. You are never lost. You are simply becoming. So before you drift away entirely, let's walk once more through the footprints we've left behind. Do you remember when we first stepped out of the Permian silence? When the world was burnt and broken, the sky low, the oceans mourning? You heard the whispers of survival in the smallest things, the glimmer of a fish fin, the tremble of a lizard foot, the sigh of the first sprouting leaf. In the deepest dark, where even time held its breath, you watched the earth begin again. It was not dramatic. It was quiet, almost invisible, like a sprout under snow. But it was there, and you were there with it. You saw the ocean stir, tiny plankton blinking back into sunlight, ray-finned fish flickering through coral dreams, the rise of marine reptiles gliding like ghosts, ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, nothosaurs. You didn't just learn names. You felt them, the way they moved, the way they tried, the way they found their place again, after the long silence of extinction. And just like them, you too have moved through silence. You too have rebuilt after loss. You too are still learning how to swim through the waters of your own becoming. Then came the land, the quiet forests creeping back across scorched earth, the conifers and cycads dreaming their slow green dreams, the ferns whispering old songs in a language older than words. Among them walked new travelers. The reptiles split, some with narrow snouts, some with upright legs, some who would one day fly, some who would one day disappear. And in this great reptilian drama, you watched the birth of possibility. Not all of them became dinosaurs. Not all wanted to. Some found joy in shadows. Some loved the mud. Some chose speed. Some chose stillness. And like every one of us, they were simply experimenting with the art of being alive. And then dinosaurs, not mighty at first, not fierce, just curious, lean, fast, a little nervous. Parasaurus darting through dry brush, Coelophysis flitting like a secret in the dusk. Tiny tyrants with big dreams, classroom pioneers in evolution's early experiments. They weren't famous. They weren't called dinosaurs yet. They didn't know they'd be legends. They just lived. They just chased. They just tried not to get eaten. And somehow, that was enough. You saw them grow slowly. You saw how some grew feathers, not to fly yet, but to warm. You saw how some danced to win hearts, how others stayed quiet, hiding beneath the tall leaves. And you understood. Greatness doesn't shout its arrival. It waits. But it wasn't all dinosaurs. You didn't forget the others, the ones who slept, who survived through slowness, who curled beneath stones and waited out the storms. You honored the night dwellers, the small ones, the soft ones, who taught us that rest is revolutionary, and the cynodonts, those quiet dreamers, who carried the first flickers of mammalian hope. Whiskers, warmth, love, they didn't roar, they raised families, they planted the roots of future compassion, in soil no one thought fertile, and you saw them. In the sky above, the continents shifted. Pangea cracked like an old shell, letting water seep in, letting climates bloom anew. The map of the world was being rewritten, and so was your map, dear listener, because every time you felt your world split open, every time something you thought would stay changed, you too were Pangea, breaking, becoming. Change is not failure. Change is invitation. You heard the first songs of night, creatures calling not with roars, but with color, scent, and shadow. You saw courtship without words, intelligence without size, brilliance without spotlight. The world didn't need applause, it just needed presence. And now, in this quiet moment, as your body softens, your mind floats like mist, you remember, you were never meant to be perfect. You were only ever meant to grow. And here you are, at the edge of one age, and the beginning of another. The Jurassic waits, a time of thunderous footsteps, soaring giants, lush forests dripping with time. We will go there, but not tonight. Tonight we pause. We thank the Triassic. We thank ourselves. You've walked through a story that began in fire, passed through silence, and arrived at music. You've seen yourself in the fragile, in the awkward, in the determined. This was not just a bedtime story. It was a mirror, a song, a hand reaching across 250 million years to say, you are not alone. So rest now, friend of history. The fire is low. The creatures sleep. The stars are winking secrets to one another. Just above your dreams, let your breath slow. Let your jaw unclench. Let the ache of the day dissolve into layers of deep time comfort. You are loved. You are enough. You are still becoming. And in your sleep, you carry with you all the stories that Earth has whispered into your soul. Sleep now, little mammal. Sleep now, little fern. Sleep now, traveler of oceans, deserts, and stars. The Jurassic can wait. For now, just rest.